Yeah, there's a red light. Yeah, we're on. Yeah, there's no way to talk about me. Right. So I just trying to prove to Janet that what she can do, I can do as well. And it would appear that attention-seeking ploys are the item de nos jours, as they say. So unfortunately, these things usually come in threes. So I'm just interested to see who's next. Right. Good morning, members, and welcome to a slightly delayed start to the National Park Authority meeting on Friday, the 22nd of May. Yes, because Angela's laptop received some water, she's gone down to IT. So if we get to agenda item 8 before she's back, we will have to pause before we start making decisions before our monitoring officer is back. But we're hoping she will be back shortly. So in the meantime, if we begin with agenda item 1, which is apologies for absence, I've received apologies from Bill Hanley, Ginny Priestley, Lee Hartshorn, Charlotte Kelly and Hannah Corran. Does anyone bring any apologies from anyone else? If not, thank you, members. That's as apologies as received. Minutes of the previous meeting. Are there any corrections that anyone desperately wishes to make to those minutes? If not, members, could I have someone move the recommendation? Ken Rustage, thank you. Seconded, Janet. Dugdale, forgive me. All those in favour of accepting the minutes, show of hands, please. Any against? Any abstentions? Thank you, members. That's unanimous. I've not been informed of any urgent business, nor of any public participation. Are there any declarations of interest that members might wish to make? If not, no members making any declarations, so thank you. We'll move on to items for information. Agenda item 6 is Chair's briefing. Something of a list of numbers, I'm afraid, to begin with. Just to say that since we met on the 27th of March, I've attended 6 briefing sessions with the Deputy Chair and the Chief Executive. I've attended 1 resources committee on the 24th of April, 2 planning committees and 1 planning site visit. The planning committees on the 10th of April and 15th of May, and 1 chairs and vice chairs meeting on the 14th of April. 2 National Parks England directors' monthly briefing sessions with the chair and the executive director of National Parks England, and that is that's a monthly occurrence in between a monthly brief newsletter, which I'm hoping to be able to circulate to members. The newsletter and the briefings are really just to bring the directors or the chairs of the National Park Authorities in England up to speed with the initiatives that National Parks England is undertaking. What I'm investigating is forwarding the newsletter to members so that members are as up to speed with the initiatives that are occurring at an England level. And I'm hoping within the next fortnight or so to be able to do that. So it's not mandatory to read them, but some of you may find it interesting to find out what's happening beyond the Peak District National Park at an England level. So there have been 2 local plan steering group meetings on the 31st of March and the 15th of May. The last one was to agree the final version or of the contents of the draft that is being brought to members' forum later on today. On the 17th of April, some of you may be aware that along with Phil, Chief Exec, we between us managed to plant a sapling from the Sycamore Gap tree, which is at the bottom of the landscape near the entrance into the National Park estate. And that went out onto places like BBC and what have you. Again on the same day, along with the head of planning, Brian Taylor, he and I met with Lord Deben, who might be more familiar to some of you as John Selwyn Gummer, been elevated to the Lords, but it was regarding the sustainability elements in the proposed new town at Adlington. Now, some of you might be aware that proposal wasn't in the initial tranche of settlements that are being considered for expansion under the new towns initiative, as it were. Lord Deben and Brian and I thought that because it wasn't in, it hadn't been accepted. Lord Deben was of the opinion that that wasn't the case, that the fact it wasn't in the first tranche didn't mean that it wasn't still a strong contender. And it would appear since then there's been various notices issued, and that is the case, that it is still there as a I won't say likely, but certainly as a probable, don't quote me anyway, but there's every possibility that Adlington will be expanded. But because it's in a particular landscape which has wetland areas and the rest of it, there appears to be a desire to ensure that there is appropriate open space within any settlement, to ensure that occupants of that settlement have, let's say, an alternative to accessing the Peak District, because our concern is its proximity to the National Park might mean that area, that immediate area, receives undue visitor pressure or unmanaged visitor pressure if that isn't taken into account at an early stage in the development processes. So that was our direction of travel in meeting with Lord Deben, and at least I think it was the one thing that he took notes on, not least because we were able to use the example of our negotiations with Sheffield City Council over the proposed expansion westwards towards the boundary of the National Park, where in our statement of common ground we were able to say that we had negotiated with Sheffield City Council, and it's accepted that open space provision within any development would be sufficient to encourage people to use that open space rather than immediately trying to access the national park. So it's a way of trying to mitigate a potential future impact, both on the east side in Sheffield but also on the west side if Adlington does progress as a new town development. A couple of final things. On the 23rd of April, I met with Patrick Brady as Chair of Planning and Chair of the Local Plan Steering Group, and with officers. We met with a planning inspector who was giving an early opinion on the draft local plan, which was encouraging in the main. There were one or two areas where we were given advice, let's say, and Adele and the steering group have taken that on board, and you won't see it, I think, overtly in the document that will be considered at members' forum, but at least it is in there. And it was a lot of it was to do with housing numbers and the like. But I'll leave Adele to make any detailed explanation if such is required later on today. And then finally, the night before last, the 20th of May, along with Brian Taylor, he and I were on a panel which included the county councillor, district councillor and the local police officer in what was called the Bakewell Conversation in Bakewell Town Hall, called by the new mayor, who might be familiar to some of you, as a chap called James Beresford. So you can't keep a good man down, as they say. But there was in excess of 60 people, and the town council was surprised, shocked even, that so many people turned out. But it was really encouraging. It did enable Brian and myself and James and others to circulate around the tables as they were discussing particular issues and lay some of the myths and rumours that abound, and to explain to people some of the detail over things like housing, things like the use of the Derbyshire Clause, and so on, that people were raising. Some of it was very, not surprisingly, because it was a Bakewell conversation, was very particular to elements in Bakewell, but nevertheless it gave us an opportunity to inform, and it gave me an opportunity to remind people that A, we can't do everything, and B, as our resources shrink, then we have to make some unpalatable decisions in order to continue functioning, which I don't think came as an immediate surprise to people, but at least we were able to reinforce both what we can do and what we can't do, because we aren't empowered to do things, but what we can't do because we don't have the resources. And now it looks as if Charles has spilled some. So I told you these things came in threes. So anyway, so yeah, that concludes my briefing. Well done, Simon. Simon has a new role as yes, a new role of tissue paper by the seam of it. Okay, so that concludes. It was a very dramatic end to my briefing, but thank you, Charles. So I think without further ado, before anything else happens, we'd better move on to the Chief Executive. Oh, sorry, Ruth Swetnam.
Thank you, Chair. Just wanted to ask a question.
By all means.
You said that you met with planning inspector regarding the local plan. Is that the person who will actually be conducting the review, or it was just general?
No, he heads a particular section, and members of that section include some of the people who do the scrutiny of local plans. But and I think quite rightly, he's not the person who will be undertaking the inspection. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Any other questions or comments? If not, agenda item 7, then over to Phil for the Chief Exec's report.
Yeah. Morning, members. Just a couple of updates from the report as you've received it. In the report, I said there were 5 vacancies for members, which was correct at the time. Since then, we've had 2 notifications for 2 of those to be filled. However, we didn't receive those in time to do the processes for those people to be here today as members, so they'll be at the next meeting, and we're still waiting for a notification of 1 of the others, and then it's for the parishes forum to go through the process for the parish member, and the Secretary of State recruitment will happen in the summer and autumn for that appointment as well. I did want to just highlight section 2.8.1, which is income generation, because there's been some really great achievement there, a lot of hard work by a lot of people in various forms of income. So do take a note of that, because where we've been at, which was necessary to make difficult decisions, we're now in a position where we're able to take advantage of opportunities that are out there. And I think that's really exciting and really positive. And just finally, a couple of things on the 75th to update you on. So as well as the stuff we did around the actual anniversary on the 17th of April, since then we've got confirmation that a couple of commemorative ales that are going to be called 75, they're being brewed and launched later in the year. Really excitingly, Northern Rail are naming a train, Peak District 75, and that'll be launched from Manchester Piccadilly and will be serving the northern area of the network. The open top sightseer bus, which starts on Saturday for the season, that's got the 75th logo being put on it as well, so that will be seen by a lot of people. And we have confirmation now that the Minister for National Parks will be attending the report launch that we're doing here in the summer. So this is the report commissioned by all 4 national parks who are 75. We're hosting that launch here. It's a national invitee list, and the Minister will be coming as part of that, so that's good. And happy to take any questions on anything in the report, Chair.
Thank you, Phil. Do you want to scroll forward from recommendations?
I think they're for the next.
Oh, right, okay. Okay. Ken Rustage.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just a couple of points on page 19, the car parks. So I really welcome that. The revenue remains strongly bolstered this year with the enhancement of works on the number of sites. There's been much in the media about that, people parking to the side of the Snake Pass. So if we've got more car parks, it'd be a win-win situation to get people, because we don't want people to be parked on verges and do that. And just a quick question, please, who is the Minister? I should know that. Who is the Minister for the Peak District? The National Parks, I mean.
It's Mary Cray. So she's, I think she's the Minister for Nature, I think it's called, but within that she has a National Park remit.
Was it Doncaster? She got voted out, notice in it. Yeah, thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Ken. Charlotte, then Matt, then Yvonne.
It's just a comment, really. I was really pleased that I didn't know we got a seasonal wildfire ranger. That's really good. And he obviously, you say he's trying to progress enforcement and with the authorities, and it must be working because Joanna Collins and me have been pushing High Peak for a long while to do a bit of enforcement because I think that's what's needed, get out on social media. And we've been hitting our heads against a brick wall, but just the last week or so, we seem to be making progress. So maybe he you know, hopefully that's with his work too. So thank you.
Thank you, Charlotte.
Yeah, I know he's working particularly with Sheffield as well, and he is a former police officer because it isn't actually us that has to enforce these things, so he's trying to corral resources.
High Peak are going to, they're talking about delegation actually of powers to the national park. I don't know if that's going to be something we can look about.
Is this a case of we hear it first here?
We'll have a look at that. There'll be obviously there'll be some training needed, some health and safety considerations, resource capacity. If that's something that we haven't been doing, how are we going to resource that? So I'd be very interested to talk about that when it comes up.
Thank you, Matt Buckler.
Yeah, it's another question about wildfires. I just wondered if you'd seen the recent report on burning from the University of Leeds and the impact of the large-scale fires, both managed and wildfires, on the communities in and around the national park. And I wondered if we had a view on that report.
I only saw it yesterday, Matt. So I will. I'll take that away and have a look at that. Thanks.
Thanks, Matt. Charlotte. No, thank you. Yvonne Witter.
Hi, thank you very much for your report, Phil. I just wanted to comment on the toilets. I visit the one at Millersdale on Easter Monday, and it's really good to see the high quality of that, how it has been upgraded. One of the things that I noticed that people were using the tissue to dry their hands and they're dropping it. There's no bin. There's an electric hand dryer, but they're not using it. They are using the finish, take the paper, dry their hands, and they're just dropping it on the floor. And I just thinking, is it because everything is in white, they can't identify that there's a hand dryer there to use? But people are using it. They weren't charging then on Easter Monday. I think it started after that. But it's lovely to see that and to know that it's open 24 hours. It's not locked during the night. So that's good. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Charlotte. Any other comments or questions? Janet Dugdale.
Yes, just to add fuel to the fire of wildfires. I noticed wildfires have come up in these questions, but also the issue appears in the Moors for the Future report and the Foundation report, and there seem to be multiple agencies trying to deal with this. Who's joining it all up and bringing together a coordinated response?
So there's two aspects to that. So in terms of fighting fires and dealing with fires, we coordinate that through the Fire Operations Group, and that's been very successful. That's been going for many years, and there's training organised for all the partners, and the partners are the fire and rescue services, but also the major landowners, also the moorland managers, and everyone comes together. Whatever disagreements people have, that group brings everyone together, talks about the risks and how to deploy and mobilise and train and so on. And FIPL has even provided funding for kit for that group. So that's around kind of coordinating the response. In terms of coordinating the comms, that's a bit trickier because there are different partners have different views on what should be coordinated, what should be the focus. So we coordinate some comms and we lead on a lot. But other national parks are doing stuff, other organisations are doing stuff, and I think it is important that does get coordinated because you could be anywhere in the country and visiting any national park and you need to hear the same stuff. So there are a couple of coordination groups. One's led by the Cairngorms. But then the historic environment, I was with those officers, and they've got a wildfire kind of group that's also got a view. So I think there isn't a solution yet, Janet, but it does need to be pulled together. And things like that report that Matt highlighted, that's a certain sort of angle on the comms around it. There's other people who really are focused on fuel load risk. There's other people who are focused on prevention, and it can get a little bit disjointed, the messaging.
Okay. Melandra Smith.
Thank you, Chair. On the issue of wildfires again, when I was a child, we lived in the Staffordshire Moorlands, backed up actually against the moor, and we used to notice every year people burning strips, doubtless as fire breaks. And I wondered whether that still happens on our moors, and if so, who's in charge of it? I haven't noticed so many lately, and I did used to feel when I was a child that that was one of the things that prevented us from having a massive fire that took our own home away. So interested to hear about that.
So I think pieces of moorland get burnt for various reasons. One might be to create fire breaks, but that can also be achieved through cutting. Other people might burn to stimulate growth of new vegetation, particularly for grouse moor management. So there are different reasons why it happens. There are increasing restrictions on being able to do it related to the depth of peat. So there may be that has reduced the amount of burning that you see out there. There are definitely different views as to the benefits, the pros and cons of doing that. I think there was another, what was the last part of what you asked?
It was who coordinated it
Yes.
fire prevention, as in measures like that intended to prevent the fires breaking out in the first place. Thank you.
So I'd say there's no overall coordination of how these moorlands are managed, because under different ownerships there's different management regimes. There is sharing of kind of good practice, but I think there is some disagreement from the different parties that own different moorlands as to how best they are managed. It's quite a contested area, and there's kind of evidence produced on both sides. Natural England's position is definitely moving away from the burning because of the impact on the habitat and the peat. I can see Rachel wants to come in, if that's all right, Chair.
Yeah, certainly, Rachel.
Yeah,
Bennett.
just really quickly, I think it's really worth noting that using the term wildfire, although they are out of control fires, the cause of fires in the UK, in our uplands, is very, very rarely due to wildfire, true wildfire, and it's most often not human ignition sources, either on purpose or by accident. So I just think it's worth noting that when we, as it's incredibly important to understand that. So yeah, wildfires don't really get wildfires. It's not part of our ecology in the UK. But yeah, that's my point. Thank you.
Thanks, Rachel. It's kind of wild in the sense of uncontrolled, isn't it, rather than anything else? Yeah. Okay. Charles Greaves.
Yeah. So back when I was a kid, back in the 80s, back while we were still farming, we had repeated instances in my area where supposed controlled burns went out of control, and the people who started them basically just phoned round everybody and said sorry, and then did the same the year after. So cutting I think has helped, but some of it is down to that individual management of it. But with the notion that you can control fire perhaps is a bit more wishful thinking rather than the reality of it, when the wind turns, when the weather turns, and the fact that the people starting it don't really have the resources to corral it if they're not doing it properly. So there's upside downs and back to fronts with all of it, but I think I think unfortunately perhaps there's some views that are very aimed towards the financials rather than the impacts. So I think a nuanced approach, perhaps what's right in one place and what works somewhere else, is the way that it ought to be dealt with. But I think there was a time when lots of farmers around my neck of the woods were very unhappy with the state of uncontrolled controlled burning.
Yeah, I think more recently some of the residents of Sheffield weren't very happy either. Anyway, okay. Any other comments or questions of Phil on his report? If not, thank you for that. It's a report to be noted. Can I have someone move that? Ruth Swetnam, thank you. Seconded. Amanda Martin. All those in favour of noting? Any against? Any abstentions? Thank you, members. We can move on now to that part of the agenda for decision making, and agenda item 8, performance and business plan, corporate risk, and Emmett Badley is here to. Okay, anything you want to say? Okay, so there's no alterations, no additions to the report. So members, you've had the report before you. Any comments or questions at all, please, of Emmett? Matt Buckler.
Yeah, there are a couple of things in terms of the risks. So asking about what are the implications of the risks. So specifically, I was looking at the one in 3.4 1.1 and what are we doing to mitigate it. And the other one was part 5.2. Because I can see that those are two quite big risks, but they're not within our control, and so we can just wait to see what happens. But it'd be good to know what we're doing proactively, so to try and manage that, and mitigate that risk.
Okay, thanks, Matt. Emmett? He's frantically trying to find the relevant paragraphs.
The first one was inconsistent and unclear direction for upland farming. The impact rating of this risk has been increased from medium to high as a result of the updated SFI offer for 2026. And the other one was constituent authorities are not coordinated and working to deliver the National Park Management Plan has been added in recognition of changes to and developments within the constituent authorities. Obviously, both of those things are going to happen. One of which is, all in response to elections. What are we doing to mitigate it? And because those are risks which are.
Sure. Yeah, understood. Emmett, you ready to respond?
Thanks, Matt. So with regards to the inconsistent and unclear direction for upland farming, within the look forward, so the risk register for the year ahead, that risk has been brought together with some other risks around kind of upland farming and environmental land management stewardship schemes. So we now have a new risk which is titled Unfavourable Outcome from New Elms Development, which kind of aims to capture, so yeah, just to note that risk has been kind of transformed slightly when we look ahead to the year ahead. And in terms of the sort of actions and ways that we're managing that, so within the more kind of thorough risk register, we now in the new system have a way of sort of tagging what capacity we believe the National Park Authority has to manage these risks. So for the kind of environmental land management scheme development, we've tagged that as we have some capacity to carry out that risk, to mitigate that risk. And the reason for kind of adding that tag is as an acknowledgement of where, as you say, we actually do lack the sort of ability to manage that. And in terms of the actions we have there, it's mostly around kind of advocacy and engagement. So quite a lot of it relates to the FIPL programme and our kind of proactive engagement with farming communities around environmental land management and supporting them to advocate for policy that is kind of favourable to the kind of upland farming that we need to see in the Peak District to help us deliver on our nature recovery. But yeah, as you say, there's a difficulty in our sort of influence there. And with regards to the second one, the constituent authorities risk, again, that is one that we have tagged as having some capacity to mitigate, so not kind of full capacity to mitigate, in acknowledgement of where, that is a difficult thing for us to influence. And here, again, it's similarly around kind of relationship management. So there's some actions in here that relate to our need to engage with the mayoral combined authorities as well as our other constituent authorities, and kind of reflects what we've done already in terms of responding to consultation around changes to constituent authority kind of makeup, and then also in terms of future actions that we can undertake. There's other things around kind of proactive engagement, data sharing, and that kind of element. So I think, that's sort of, those two are quite good examples really of this reflection of how we are trying within the new risk process to give a bit more detail and understanding to where we don't have very much control around risks.
Thanks, Emmett. I think as well, Matt, to help understand, if you look at page 46 of the document, there's there's a constituent authority at the bottom of page 46. There's risk description on the constituent authorities. On page 53, on the unfavourable outcomes from New Elms developments, there's a list of what existing mitigation is occurring and what further mitigation actions are to be implemented. So I think if you like, the headline in the text of Emmett's report is reflected in more detail in the content of the multicoloured documentation that follows it. It's a case of digging deeper, but there are certainly actions being undertaken and actions proposed to be undertaken. Okay. Any other comment? Andy Nash.
Thanks. I want to talk about the national scale infrastructure impact risk. I think what we've got here is a great start. My concern is more about the longer term, which we don't seem to be thinking about here, which is the safety of a CO2 pipe running through the park and the above ground infrastructure that will be built away from the main sites. What will we do with that in 15 years' time? I think we just need to be thinking about that now rather than leaving it to the end.
Presumably that's dependent on whatever proposals ultimately come forward for us to be able to formulate an opinion and an approach.
I'd like the risk to be registered now, so we are thinking about it and taking it when it comes.
Emma?
Yeah, thanks. I'll log that as a kind of more long-term thing for us to note in this.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments or questions? If not, members, there is a recommendation, a set of 3 recommendations. Can I have someone to propose those recommendations? Janet Dugdale, thank you. Martin Beer seconded. All those in favour? Thank you. Any against? Any abstentions? Thank you, members. That's been approved. Thank you, Emma. We move on now, in that case, to agenda item 9, which is the National Park Management Plan Progress Report for 25-26. Sarah Rowley is here to guide us through this. Do you have any comments or additions to make, Sarah? Yep, thank you. Yes.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, members. I've been asked to provide just a bit more introduction and a bit more information about the National Park Management Plan online report, just because of the portal being down and you having paper reports. So the purpose of the report is to act as a central repository and an evidence base for the National Park Management Plan, and it actually builds up year on year over the 5 years of the plan. So we're currently looking at year 3. There is, as a note, the rest of year 2 report detail was in there and the rest of year 1 is still in there. So this is a huge repository of information now. So basically, just to remind you that updates came from both the authority and we also get updates from partners for this report as well. And this allows us, the web-based format allows us to show updates, data, images, website links, press release, any other bits of information. So it's a huge, huge document now. And so for members who've perhaps seen this document online, and you might have looked at it this time round, but if you haven't had chance, it's not very printable. So apologies about that. But if you've got any questions later, I can sort of delve into it a bit more. And just to quickly refresh on where the information has come from. So most of the info from the authority isn't new to members. So you will have heard Emma in our team give you the climate change or the AIM1 update back in September. Sue Fletcher, before she left the authority, provided an update on land and nature and also in Welcome in Place, so that was the last meeting. And then Brian Taylor gave you the Thriving Communities update, and that was in February. So a lot of the information from the authority you have heard before. But some of the things that you won't have heard is from partners. And you know that a couple of years ago, we started to really try and engage with partners much more and to get them to give us updates on what their activity was across the plan. And I'm really pleased to sort of inform you that we've had updates from Derbyshire County Council, Staffordshire County Council, Natural England, Historic England, Peak District Foundation, Moors for the Future. The water companies Severn Trent, United Utilities and Yorkshire Water have all contributed, along with Yorkshire Wildlife Trust, Staffordshire Wildlife Trust and the YHA. So if you haven't had a chance to look at that report, please do at your leisure. There's some really nice updates in there from all of those partners as well. And then just a moment to touch on the actual action. So you'll see in your overview cover report, there's a table in there about where the actions rested at year 3. But just to note that we've had 3 more actions that have been moved into the achieved. So last year we were up to 3, this year we're up to 6. And you'll also notice that there's 3 actions that have now been marked as grey with information no longer available. And these actions have been sort of no longer had resources allocated to them off the back of the reorganisation from the authority and the restriction in core funding. So that's about it, and I'm happy to take any specific questions.
Thanks very much, Sarah. It's encouraging to see that there's nothing in the red zone, and only 6 out of, 49 in the amber. And I would endorse Sarah's comment. I did read the entire report prior to committee, the entire background document. I was suffering a significant degree of insomnia. But it is a really interesting report. It's a really interesting insight into the breadth and depth of the work of the authority and our partners. And I would recommend, I wouldn't recommend reading it all in one go, but certainly dipping into it to just get a feel for what we are doing and what we're achieving and what our partners are achieving. I think sometimes because we only receive reports on specific items, we lose sight of the breadth and depth of what we do and what our partners do to enable us to achieve our objectives. So it's well worth a read, even if you don't suffer from insomnia. In the meantime, Rachel Bennett.
Yeah, thank you very much, Sarah. That's really, really useful, and thanks for your presentation. Just on the proposals on the table that you talked about, I would find it really helpful if we could understand, because this is year 3, right? So, but I would really, I'd find it really helpful to understand like what was our forecasted idea of where we would be in terms of progress. This says where we are, but like it doesn't tell us like how on track we are. So it's like by year 3, did we expect to have, you know, looking at climate change, 15 actions, or did we expect to have 80 actions? Does that make sense? Yeah.
Yes, very much so. It's a bit of a tricky one, really, because this National Park Management Plan is so vast in terms of the actions that are within there. And if you recall that actually within each of the actions, there are critical success factors which sit underneath it, which are, there are actually hundreds if you added those all up. Because this is a partnership plan as well, some of it is based on sort of outcomes and whether people have done things, and so it's not as what you might, you know, if we did a financial assessment or anything like that, it's much harder to be able to monitor from that point of view. But we are looking at a brand new way of doing the National Park Management Plan. Emmett and our team will be leading on that, and we're starting the work with the SORB, and so we'll absolutely take that on board in terms of future years.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, Sarah. Simon Thompson.
Thanks, Chair. It's two related questions, really. I think just to echo what the chair said earlier, I do think that the report on the web is great, just in by way of tracking how we're progressing on this. But underneath some of the objectives, we also have targets. So if you take the climate change one as objective one as an example, we've got a target there for a 28% reduction in GHGs by 2028. And we don't actually report on progress against that. There is some data in the report, but it stops at 23. It doesn't show progress since 23. And I think it's quite important where there is an overarching target to just comment on how we are progressing against that, because if we are missing it, as I suspect we are, because we're only 2 years off 2028, and I very much doubt we're going to achieve 25% reduction by then, I think there should be some commentary around why, and there should also be some commentary about the appropriateness of the actions that we have chosen to take to achieve the target, because it's just a way of testing whether we're actually doing the right things and whether the things that we are doing are truly effective. So that would certainly, it's a very complex report, but that would certainly apply to, for example, greenhouse gas reductions, but also the specific target on moorlands in the carbon reduction part, where we've got a specific target on tonnes of CO2 removed.
Thanks, Simon. Yeah, it's a tricky one, especially with the greenhouse gas emissions. So the reason why that's reported out to 2023 is because of the time lag in terms of the national data. And so we use a consistent database. So, and that does get updated each year, but that's just consistent with the amount of data coming through. In terms of the narrative around it, yes, you're right. We probably could look at actually putting some explanation in there. But again, a bit like Emmett's talked through about these risks, actually we're in a transition from what was the previous National Park Management Plan, the way that these objectives were actually written, the targets, and actually how we came up with these targets and whether they were actually done from a data-led perspective or whether they were even achievable. And so actually some of this is just a case of we put the data out there, which is national, but actually we have very little control over what that data says. But we will be changing the way that we do this going forward, so we'll take that on board.
If I may, just to follow up, I mean, I do think that's important, because on the things that are within our control, which are the action points, we're obviously tracking pretty well. It's very encouraging to see that there's nothing in the red box, as the chair said earlier. But there's a certain dissonance here, because even though we are performing very well under these specific actions, we know that on climate change and indeed on nature recovery, overall, we're heading in the wrong direction. So we really need to sort of explain why that gap exists and what is within our control and what is not.
Yeah, completely agree with you. And it's something that we are absolutely actively looking at in terms of the next iteration of the management plan. We will do a very different process for the next time around. So yeah, thanks, Simon.
Thanks for those comments, Simon. Janet Dugdale.
Yeah, thank you. Sarah, I just want to congratulate you and the team on the progress that you've made in the last year. And notwithstanding, the wrinkles around data and maybe we're not meeting things that we would hope to meet. I think overall, given the climate, not the climate change climate, but the wider environment that we've been dealing with politically and economically, and our partners have been dealing with, I think the fact that we're making as much progress as we have made is credit to our partners, but also the officers at the authority who are leading and facilitating on getting this work done. I was part of the working group that helped to put this management plan together and steer it. And the objectives and targets we put in place, particularly for things like climate change, were very, very ambitious, because we wanted to be aspirational and ambitious rather than put things that could easily be met. And so it's pushing us towards remembering to do those things. Hopefully we will take them forward as well as we possibly can. But I just want to say thank you to you and everybody working on this team and the partners who are progressing these things.
Yeah, thanks, Janet, and thank you for reminding us of some of the context of where we are, where we come from. Ruth Swetnam.
Thank you, Chair. obviously we've got these 3 things and they're no longer active, and inevitably we can't do everything due to the constraints that have been placed on our budget through our settlement. I just wondered though, what are those things that we are effectively having to stop doing?
Yeah, thanks. So there's 3 targets. The first one is target 11 on the nature recovery side, and that's the landscape description unit photography. So that's actually an old methodology that we were trialling or piloting to try and see if we could look at landscape change. That's been superseded by the Landscape Observatory, and so actually this work really is not required anymore, so that's gone. The last 2 are actually within the Welcome in Place, and one of them was the Peak District Proud initiative that obviously ran during COVID to make sure that we were communicating as clearly as we could. There's been some changes to our comms plan that's gone through our team, that's gone through transition, but actually quite a lot of the Peak District Proud stuff now has sort of fed into the tourism charter, and there's fed into a lot of the work that is starting to be picked up again with the relationship with EMCA, and actually they're mobilising how we can get a better, more seamless comms approach across the patch, really. And again, we are talking to the data team at EMCA, and I know Phil and other management team are working on relationships there. So that's kind of work in progress, but it's that specific target of Peak District Proud. And then the last one is just the underserved communities. Now, this is just a specific action around the mapping of the underserved communities in and around the park, and the developing of monitored tools to measure these opportunities that could be run with partners. So it's kind of more, it's not really very action-y based, but it's kind of a background thing that would have been nice to have to help direct some of our strategy. But again, obviously with the massive changes to the engagement team, that sort of fell by the wayside, really.
Okay, yeah, so just, if I may just come back, this just really emphasises Simon's point. I think that little bit of commentary is very helpful, because it isn't actually a case they've all been dropped. They've been reconsidered, and actually that was very helpful, so thank you very much.
Thanks, Ruth. I think that's something to note for future. Yeah. Patrick Brady.
Yes, Chairman. Small point. It's only just occurred to me as we've been talking. Can somebody explain what part 2 of the recommendation means? The implementation of required amendments. What's be delegated? What does the implication of any required amendments mean? Why does it need amending?
I assume that it was the case of, I'll be corrected probably by Sarah, but if members had any amendments to the progress report, to the report itself, then, as it says, those amendments should be delegated head of resources.
Yeah, I think it's just the terminology, but it's the same as when we do the business plan, that actually if there's any amendments that need to go through, any bits and bobs like that, that we don't bring it back to authority, because it is such a huge consolidated report of actions that have previously happened. There isn't really a decision as such to take, and it's just that it's delegated.
So on the basis of the way this discussion is going, we can just approve part 1, can we, and leave it at that?
Yeah.
I was going to say that, as far as I can see, element 2 of the recommendations is redundant because no one's proposed any amendments. So yes, we can ditch that, I assume.
Agreed, yeah.
Yeah, agreed. So
well, I'll move it on the basis of number 1.
Thank you, Patrick. Can I have a seconder for that? Charles Greaves. So on the basis of the recommendations, unless there are any other comments or questions, on the basis of recommendation just being recommendation 1, it's been moved and seconded. Can I have a show of hands in favour? Any abstentions? 1 abstention. Any objections? Thank you, members. That's been approved. In that case, we move on to agenda item 10, which is the internal audit plan for next year. Sinead and Thomas Absalon from Veritas. Thomas, welcome. Okay. Yes, beware of the water jug. Sinead. It seems to have a life of its own. Okay. Before I invite Tom to make any comments, Sinead, is there anything further you wish to say at this juncture? No? Okay. Tom, you wish to make a few comments, yes?
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everybody. Yes, so I'm here to present the internal audit work programme for 2026-27. The programme we have to present every year in line with our professional standards and the audit charter that we have with the authority. The work programme is designed to provide assurance to the authority across a range of key risk areas, such that around this time next year we'll come back to provide our annual opinion on your framework for governance, risk management and control. It's been developed through our own risk assessment and with input from Sinead and Angela and key officers at the authority. So happy to take any questions or otherwise for
okay, thank you, Tom.
approval. Thank you.
Members, you've received the report. You've seen the topics that are up for internal audit work during this year. Patrick Brading.
Chairman, can I ask on page 65, the topic contract procedure rules, what does off-contract spend mean?
Right. You can ask. Who wishes to explain? Angela?
Yeah, so members will recall that on the last internal audit we looked at exemptions and we looked at the process we put in place for that. Now what we're looking at is when people perhaps don't comply, well, what we're wanting to double check is that officers aren't failing to comply with the procurement processes and the contract procedure rules, so i.e. that they are obtaining the quotes that are required with regard to the thresholds sitting within the CPRs. So, yeah, I hope that, does that explain?
Okay, thank you. Angela, any other comments or questions? Amanda Martin.
It was more of a curiosity question. You've explained how the topics have been picked. It'd be helpful to understand when was the last time these particular topics were reviewed or had an internal audit, just so I can understand.
Sinead?
Dangerously close to that.
Yes.
So we have like a cycle where everything comes up in the cycle every 3 to 4 years. Then I personally look at areas alongside Angela and Tom to say that's an area that I have some concerns in. So we pick some ad hoc areas as well. So say, for example, health and safety, that's on a rolling basis. So 4 years ago since we looked at that. Planning performance is probably about 4 years since we've looked at that. Retail operations hasn't been in the last number of years, but we've just put in a new till system. We've had a lot of change in that area. So I'm really key to make sure that the processes are working in that area. Information governance, 21-22 was the last year we did that. So, and contract procedural rules, I can't see in the near past of the information that I have, so the last 7 or 8 years that we've done it. So again, we spend about 10 million a year and we need to make sure that we're complying with standing orders for those payments. Myself and Angela only see the exemptions, or we wouldn't see every single transaction that goes through the system because there's millions of transactions. So it's just to make sure that officers are complying. So mostly cyclical and then areas that I want to shine a light on.
That makes sense.
Thank you.
And it gives them comfort that it's not high-risk areas on an annual basis.
Would it be too onerous to indicate when the previous scrutiny had occurred in subsequent reports?
No, I have it on a spreadsheet.
In that case, I think it might be useful on the back of what Mandy has raised. Yeah, okay, thank you. Any other comments or questions, members?
Can I just come up with one clarification?
You may indeed, Angela.
Sorry, just to explain again about the CPRs. In relation to the off-contract spend, also it goes in relation to the authority that was received. So in our contract procedurals, we allow a variation of contracts up to a certain percentage. So again, it's just making sure, because obviously once an authority is received, sometimes materials and things can change. So we allow that variance, and it's just making sure that actually what is happening is not exceeding that variance in the CPRs. Just making sure everything is within the authority that has been granted. If that helps.
Thanks for the clarification, Angela. Any other comments or questions? If not, members, there is a recommendation before you. Do I have a mover for that? Martin Beer, thank you. Mandy seconded. All those in favour? Any against? Any abstentions? Thank you, members. That's approved. Thank you, Tom. Until the next time. Thanks, Sinead. Right. Members, agenda item 11, the A57 Snake Pass Road Safety Scheme. Tim Nicholson is our officer, and we have two representatives from Derbyshire County Council who will be doing a brief introduction, yes? I think we said 5 minutes, but you know.
Hi everybody, I'm Tim Nicholson, I'm the Transport Policy Planner for the Peak District National Park Authority. As just been mentioned, we've got officers from Derbyshire County Council here today to explain the justification for carrying out this scheme along the A57 Snake Pass, which is a safer road scheme. The reason for bringing this scheme before you today is that it includes average speed cameras. Within our Transport Design Guide, supplementary planning document, we recognise the visual impact of speed cameras on the wider landscape and state that they should only be considered in extreme circumstances. Therefore, we require the provision of sufficient evidence to support their introduction. And this is particularly the case in an open landscape like the Snake Pass. So that slide is a map showing the proposed locations of the 10 average speed cameras between Glossop and Sheffield. 9 of those are within the National Park boundary. There's just one of them that isn't. And it's worth noting that although we have got that concentration of cameras along the route, none of them are located at Snake Summit or within its immediate vicinity. So it's not within that open landscape. It's also worth noting that the number of cameras is 4 less than the number that would be recommended for a scheme of this sort of length and this nature. So we're 10 rather than 14 overall. So just to run through a little bit about it, we have got the average speed cameras. Some of them may require an off-grid power supply, so we're talking about solar panels, potentially wind turbines, so that's additional infrastructure which will be part of it. Something called prime motorcycle markings and signage. This is something that is quite common in Scotland. I've seen it quite a bit, and it's quite a successful and useful scheme. It's about using chevrons on the highway to direct a motorcyclist to the optimum route around a bend, and then it's accompanied with signage to explain what that is. There are also going to be some upgraded crash barriers, including the lower barrier, which prevents motorcyclists, if they come off, actually passing through the barrier, which is really important. There will be more signage than currently is there. There will be new road markings. And as part of this, there has also been funding identified for some remedial measures on at least one of the landslips. I know there are ongoing discussions about how to resolve the wider issue of stability along the route. So I just wanted to take you through a little bit of the process so far. We did get a very early notification on this by Derbyshire County Council at a point where, to be fair, they'd been told by Department for Transport, do not tell anyone about this. And so I was sworn to secrecy. I had to promise that I wouldn't tell anyone about this. We did a very early site visit to identify optimum site locations for cameras. So myself and one of the landscape architects went out with Gary and members of the providing company Gentopic back in April of last year, and we spent the day going along looking at issues, looking where it might be best to site these things, and particularly places where we didn't want them to be. Since then, there have been ongoing discussions, in particular to address some of our concerns about one site where the original proposal was to put it within one of our woodlands, and we've managed to negotiate an alternative location. And they have provided a report to justify the use of average speed cameras along the route, which was shared at, I think it was Appendix 2 of the papers for this meeting. So you should all have had a chance to look at that. So some of you will be aware that some of you members were here in 2023 when I brought a similar report to the authority focused on similar schemes at Long Hill on the A5004 and the A5012 via Gellia routes. At the time we got holding objections into those schemes. At that authority we largely withdrew those objections following some amendments, and these are now operational. So I just wanted you to give you an idea of what these cameras look like in situ. So these photographs were all taken this week. So the photos on this side are taken on the northern edge of the scheme and show the camera location and its placement, which allows screening and the void skyline of the camera. So I took them from a range of distances just so that you can actually see how carefully that's actually being positioned, trying to avoid landscape impact. Second one's on the Via Gellia, so that's very close to Pike Hall. As I've mentioned, we've already kind of been out and agreed most of these locations, and it has been very much a negotiation in some cases. And you know, myself and the landscape architect were kind of looking, well, you know, actually, if you can take that a few feet that way, it works better. And so we have been trying to avoid causing visual impact, but you know, I have to hold hands up and say, you know, we are putting quite a lot of infrastructure on this, and there will be a visual impact overall across the scheme. I'll just take you through the recommendations for this report. It's recommended that members agree to support the delivery of the scheme by Derbyshire County Council. And the second one is that authority be delegated to the head of planning and conservation to agree any minor amendments that may come forward resulting from operational requirements that are in the best interests of the authority. And that's there because myself and Gary had discussions about one camera site in particular where Gentapic, who were the providers, were saying, well, actually this won't work here and we want to put it 20 metres that side in an either visual context. So we just would like the ability to be able to go back and negotiate if anything like that comes forward in the future. I'd now like to pass over to my colleague from Derbyshire County Council who will take you through the justification of the scheme. So it's that one.
Hi everyone, my name is Richard Hanbury and I'm Traffic Management and Road Safety Commissioner for Derbyshire County Council. So just a bit of background. So Tim's just touched on the prime aspect of this market. So just for your information, we will be the first in England. I've just received DFT approval because it requires special authorisation outside of Scotland. So following the trials that's been done in Scotland with BEAR, we will be the first authority in England to trial these markings and signs, and of which I have a number of sites that have been identified, which includes the A57 Snake Pass, just for your awareness. So the scope of the project extends between western boundary with Sheffield and the eastern boundary with Glossop, covering the 50-mile-an-hour section through the route. The Department for Transport has identified the A57 as a high-risk route, requiring a higher than normal number of recorded collisions along the network. The DFT have recognised this and have provided us funding through the Safer Roads Funds to primarily improve highway safety along that stretch. This is a slide just to show you the collision data between 2018 and 2023. The collisions that have occurred along the whole route, but not at specific locations. As you can see, the majority occur in the Peak Park area. So obviously we have a vested interest in making that safe for all its users. So for example, the 5 red circles, it's difficult to see 5 red ones there, but they are fatal collisions, obviously where someone suffered fatal injuries. The blue circle indicates serious injury collisions, so that's often where people require life-changing injuries or long absence from work, medical processes, etc. And then the green ones are what's deemed in a slight injury collision, so that could be bunging your head on the steering wheel, for example, or a minor bruise bump, just to give you some perspective around that severity level. There's also, just to show you, obviously it's very difficult to see because there is that many collisions, you wouldn't be able to count that as a representative example. It's just an indicative layout to show you safety concerns that we've got identified on that particular stretch of road. So, as an outcome from our analysis that we do around collision safe and on the network, excessive speed plays a part, and as you can see, 41% of all collisions along this route, excessive speed is what's deemed a causation factor in the analysis that the police do as part of their stats and team work when they investigate a collision. Therefore, the severity of injuries in this situation are potentially more severe due to the high speed level of collision impact that people are subjected to. So, the lack of being observed and an effective policing of that route has contributed to these collision rates. So, you will see this next slide. Sorry, I've just lost myself then, sorry. It's no coincidence that collision risks you'll see are related to where people are speeding. So this is the baseline information that shows number of casualty types as follows. Just to give you a quick oversight. So this is the case that we've based it on for average speed cameras. So you'll see the left-hand first section is the casualty savings that we can achieve through the provision of cameras on the network, which I'm sure we can all see that's a significant improvement from what we currently have evidenced as a collision history on that part of the network. So the next one just elaborates on this a little further. As you'll see, the evidence shows that whilst cameras will provide a supportive improvement, they shouldn't be done in isolation. So it's a combination. So what we're doing is what's called a blended solution. So that's other measures such as road markings, signing improvements, VRS, high visibility road markings, for example, different materials, different road, to improve that visual impact and layout of the snake pass, which will be supplemented by the camera enforcement. So obviously we're aware that excessive speed and speeding is an issue. So we're looking at potentially we could save 68 fatal serious casualties and 5 fatalities over a 20-year period. We also predict that we could save potentially 397 slight injury collisions over that period of time, based on the evidence of these methods being used previously. So this is the blended solution evidence that I've just mentioned, is that the BCR rate will be much lower compared to the average for when speed cameras alone. So obviously you can see here, with a blended solution we're aiming to achieve a 6.3. Having just cameras alone without any additional supporting measures, you would only achieve a 20.5. So you're actually getting a further 14-point reduction by introducing the associated measures that we're doing as part of this scheme. So as I think Tim's already touched on, this is just an overview of the proposed camera location sites for you just to... Yeah, of course.
You can turn that one off.
Yeah. So the locations where we're choosing to put the speed cameras relate to where we're recording higher speeds along the network. So that's the purpose of locating them in these positions.
Thank you, Gary. Richard?
Yep. So this is how we plan to implement them within your sensitive environment. So what we've tried to do, as Tim touched on earlier, is install the fewest possible cameras we can, but while still achieving an effective scheme. So we originally applied to install 14, but we've trimmed that back down to 10. Given that there's not that many, you see we're quite fortunate, A57 doesn't have that many access points from other roads. It's quite linear in its layout, so obviously we've managed to achieve a reduction from 14 down to 10 cameras. Obviously, Tim's already touched on, we've engaged with the Peak Park around camera locations where we can install them, screen them, vegetation, visual impact can be minimised. So as we're trying not to spoil views across the Peak Park. The camera posts for information will be painted grey. to blend better into the environment, and only the actual camera housing head will be yellow for enforcement reasons. Oh. So, sorry. So we will still be installing traditional methods along the route, as we've highlighted on these bullet points for you, just to have a read through. So obviously I've touched on the prime markings. We're upgrading the road marking material to a better, more resistant hard-wearing material that will last longevity-wise years extra. We're improving the VRS, which is road restraint systems. We're doing pedestrian improvements at Dinton Vale Viaduct and improvements to public rights-of-way connections. And we're also contributing as part of this scheme to the Doctor's Gate landslip work that's currently ongoing. And if we can assist, as Tim's touched on, addressing with minor landslips. Just to finish, just to give you an example, the A5012 Viagelia, since the cameras have been in and operational, the police have undertook 170 prosecutions in the first month for speeding. Just for your awareness. So it clearly has an effect.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
All right.
Okay.
Okay.
Yep. Thank you, Richard. Thank you, Gary and Tim. So if these were installed, it's a warning to watch out for them from the Viagelia experience. Patrick and then Mike. Okay, that's right.
A couple of questions first, Chairman. Is there any evidence of whether these accident figures are caused by one type of vehicle rather than another? I mean, I'm particularly thinking about motorbikes versus cars and other traffic, that sort of thing.
It's a combination. So it can, obviously, I've touched on the prime markings provision. That's because we've identified that we've got a particular issue with left-hand loss of control on bends for motorcyclists. So that's part of why this prime provision's going in to support that aspect. Some obviously the other collisions involve motor vehicles, vans, yeah. So it's not a definitive, there's a multi-user collision history that we need to address.
Okay, and second question is, bearing in mind that you're worrying about what's going on down at the Dinting Viaduct, is there a relationship between what's being proposed here and what is expected to come out of the roadworks that are being done down at Woolley Bridge and so forth in Glossop? Presumably that's going to bring more traffic more easily into Glossop and going to put more pressure on something like the Snake Pass.
Potentially, but I don't have information.
Tim, put that one on.
Sorry.
Right, so potentially, but we don't have that information. The work is being done by Tameside Council. They will have a traffic impact assessment associated with that to look at the traffic flows locally to that junction, but I'm not quite sure whether it would extend further to include the A57 route towards Sheffield.
Okay, thanks very much. Chairman, I'm happy to move this recommendation, but I do think the part 2 of the recommendation is not really in the best interests of the authority. I think it's probably in the best interest of the National Park and its residents or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, Angela will be considering that whilst I take comments from other members, yeah? I've got Mike Chaplin next.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you for the report. It's just a question about the small bit going into Sheffield, as I'm here from Sheffield City Council. Who is managing that small part of the roadworks?
Okay, so the average speed cameras will all be procured and managed by Derbyshire County Council. We have what is termed a Section 8 agreement with Sheffield City, allowing us to work on their part of the network, but ultimately the management of and enforcement of the route going westbound will be done by the Sheffield Road Safety Partnership. Anything going eastbound towards Sheffield will be managed by the Derbyshire Road Safety Partnership.
Thank you.
Happy, Mike? Thank you. Simon Thompson.
Yeah, a couple of questions, if I may. I mean, in our efforts to sort of disguise these cameras, is there a risk that drivers will not see them? Because presumably what we're trying to do here is deter speeding rather than punish people who do speed.
Yeah, we've engaged with the camera installer, Genoptic, to discuss that with them. But the overriding principle that we've tried to adhere to is to mask them from views within the Peak Park. The Site 3, which is one of the first slides that Tim put up, when the camera installer arrived on site, he'd installed it 20 metres further to the south, so it was in clear view, and we had to rein him back in, so it was masked by the trees that you saw there in the images. So it is a fine balance, and the only thing that needs to be highly visible is the camera, which is the size of a shoebox. So, you know, hopefully the motorists will see those. Along with the accompanying signage, we'll have a sign within 100 metres of each of the camera locations. So there should be enough information on that network to make them aware they're entering a speed zone that is being monitored.
Yeah. Sorry, Simon.
And the second question, if I may, is, and it's just curiosity, but in your cost-benefit analysis, you must presumably be attributing a value to a human life here. What is that value?
We do have figures. There is. Yes, there's a standard arrangement such that there's like a government level that will show you what a fatality costs, what serious injury costs, and what slight costs, and they're in the millions per one. When you involve various organisations, bodies, time, hospital, etc.
So it's just a standard methodology.
Yeah, so it's like you calculate. So it's the initial one is you talk around first year rate of return. So it's like if you spend 10 million but save 20 accidents of severities of the cost save benefit analysis is that your first year rate of return is that high that you've achieved a successful outcome in reducing harm to people.
So in my terms, it's not so much a case of putting a cost on a life, it's the cost of dealing with the impacts rather than being nailed down as to we say a life is worth X, which isn't what we're about. Right?
No.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Simon.
Could I just add?
By all means, Gary.
So the collision data in terms of statistics, it all comes from knowledge that the Road Safety Foundation has gained from networks across the county and internationally as well. So they know the savings that can occur from installing average speed cameras, these types of signing, these types of road markings and so on. All of those are fed into that benefit cost analysis. So there is a reasonable degree of confidence that we will achieve those savings.
Thank you, Gary. Ruth Swetnam.
Thank you, Chair. I've got two questions, if I may, one relating to technical issues, one to landscape. So I'll do the technical first. We're obviously talking here about, you refer to it as some kind of combined thing. We've got the cameras, and then we've got the road signage and barriers and physical infrastructure. In the kind of figures, the tables in the report, and forgive me if I've missed it, it was quite a chunky read at 8 o'clock on Sunday night. You talk about the added benefit of the cameras and the impact that made on the figures, but we've got the other view here that, as a devil's advocate question really, if we just didn't have the cameras and we just did the infrastructure stuff, what impact would that have made? Because it seemed from the figures you presented that a large proportion of that impact actually comes from the road signage and the prime markings. So I don't know, I mean, these are quite icky tables to try and unpick, and is that, what is that? Can you unpick that a little bit more for us, please?
Okay, so this table just represents if we used average speed cameras alone and no traditional measures. So if you look at that second column down in the column of 5 there, the UDIP 20-year fatal and serious injury savings relate to the traditional measures that we would normally install, like road markings, signage and the like. So that is a 0 in that table. So if we just relied on average speed cameras alone, then we're looking to save 68.442 fatal and serious injury collisions. if we use average speed cameras alone.
Yeah.
Okay? The next table, if you look at the speed management aspects, that is now 0. So there's no average speed cameras along the route. But the UDIP 20-year fatal, which is all the traditional stuff, goes down to 24.9. So from 63, 64 down to 24.9. And that's why we're proposing a blended solution, which is the speed cameras, which are now showing 68, and the UDIP showing a saving of 24. So those two combined will give a total of, what was it, 80, 92 fatal serious collisions.
Okay. Right, okay. And can I ask my second landscape question, if you don't mind? Tim, you put photographs up of these cameras being masked by trees. Now, I noticed on some of those photographs that they were ash trees and they were dying. So, you know, if we're going to rely on natural infrastructure, we need to be very clear that those trees are not going to be removed in the next 2 years because they are all dying. So are you really going to be very careful about that? Because it seems, you know, it works very well. I understand about getting those landscape views contained by trees, great, but not if they're scabby ash trees that are dying. Thanks.
You asked the question I was reserving in case no one else asked it. Gentlemen.
Yeah, thank you. So actually in the case of this particular scheme, there's a few sites where we're reliant on trees specifically across. So a lot of it's actually about letting it blend in with the rolling landscape, which is one of the main reasons why we've avoided. I mean to be fair to Gary, he quite early on he said, "We're not doing anything on top of Snake Summit, don't worry." So it's about how we situate things within the landscape. And I've got to be honest, I'm not a landscape architect or an expert, but Jen, who was with us on the day, we kind of worked together to place these as best we could within that landscape and avoid those wider views. And in most cases, we think they will be highly visible as you're approaching them. You know, there will be sufficient visibility for a driver to know that these cameras are there. And it's also worth noting that, particularly with these cameras rather than static speed cameras, the whole of the route is being monitored. So when you're driving that route, you should be aware of that. And actually, going 2 or 3 miles an hour past the camera, higher speed than you should be going at, won't necessarily mean that you get a ticket. It's your average speed across that whole route and in between camera locations. Thank you.
Okay. Next I've got Andy Nash.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks for the report, and safety is always welcome. I've got 2 questions, one around Prime and one around, are these savings achievable? When I look at the reports, the bulk of the fatalities and the major accidents are between Sheffield and Lady Bower Reservoir. If you're leaving Sheffield to come to the Hope Valley, you do have an alternative route, and I wonder how much analysis has been done about how much substitution there'll be moving from the A57 across to the road via Hathersage. I'll come back to the second question if I had a chance to answer that.
Who wants to deal with that hot potato?
We haven't looked at how these things will be displaced. I mean, what we've got is a real issue on the A57 Snake Pass. I know you saw 2 red dots there, but we've emphasised that the other fatal collisions are further along that route. But because they're obliterated by other collisions, they're now masked. But you know, I can't tell you, I can't give you an answer to your question because people may just end up selling the motorbikes or, you know, selling the car. So.
But even though it's only the last 5 years data you're demonstrating, it's been there for donkey's years, hasn't it? The accident thing. I mean, I was mindful of for those of you of a certain age, the Def Leppard drummer who lost his arm in a collision on that road. You know, that was 30 years ago. Anyway, yeah, so that reveals probably more about me than I'm comfortable with, but Andy, carry on.
Can I come back on that? Because on the route you've got at the moment, there are no villages or areas of massive habitat. Substitution into the Hope Valley sends you through areas of quite a large amount of villages with already traffic problems. And if you want to get added safety for villages, it's actually quite hard. Trying to get a speed camera in a village in the Hope Valley is almost impossible. And I understand some of the reasons why that is. But I am really worried that this will cause a substitution to a different route for the people that are speeding anyway, because if they're speeding, they probably want to speed. So it would be good if you could do some analysis about that, because I'd hate for you to put this in, and then we suddenly, in 2 years' time, you're back here saying, oh, hang on, I need to put these speed cameras in because we've suddenly got all these fatalities on the road to Hathersage.
Yeah, okay. Okay, thanks for that point, Andy.
And I've got my last question.
Yeah, go on, carry on then.
I'm a motorcyclist, or I was a motorcyclist, and I am aware of Prime. There's no details in here about how much signage is going to come, and while it might be a welcome addition, would it be better to wait until the 50-mile-an-hour zone has been in place for a while before you start adding additional signage?
Yeah, I can come in on. So,
the 50-mile-an-hour zone is already in place.
Yeah, the 50s, yeah. So, I had these conversations with the academic that ran this project in Scotland, because he's based in Derbyshire, coincidentally. And we talked around the fact, you know, not just, I've got a similar situation where I want to install these measures on, you probably know the A54 Macclesfield Main Road, A53 Axe Edge, and the A6, because we've got identified collision history with left-hand bend loss of control for motorcyclists. So, from the work they've done in Scotland with Bear and what I've seen, effectively all this will be is a sign. I'm trying to be proportionate. One of these desks sideways up, it'll be blue, and it'll have a pole that'll it's only positioned once, and then the markings are, they're like transfer down. They're not thermoplastic mode marking. They're, for better word, not iron on, but you understand the principle. I mean, melted on, so they can be removed. So the measures that accompany it are minimal. I'm not saying they're not. There will be a sign and a post, and there will be some markings. But from the evidence of the data from I've seen from Scotland, the improvements are huge.
And was that with a 50-mile-an-hour enforcement?
Different ones, different roads at different speeds and limits, but their overall 5-year project analysis indicates a huge saving in road safety collisions for motorcyclists in particular, particularly around the issue with left-hand bend loss of control. Now, there is data I've seen with regard to right-hand bend loss of control. That's less of an issue, but it does occur. So the Prime primarily focuses on the left hand, but there isn't anything to say that you can't utilise that product. But obviously, I'm just, from my perspective, we're the first in England to launch this. DFT have given me approval, special authorisation, because it's not in the regulations at present. Wales have done a similar thing, and obviously they've all seen the evidence of the Scotland case trial. So I'll be honest, it is a new thing, so it will be a case of let's see. But I am mindful of the visual impact of what we're going to do. But I've also got such support that the Chief Constable of Derbyshire Constabulary is extremely interested in this project, and they're playing quite an active involvement from their motorcycle enforcement group. So I'm obviously trying to utilise that support from Derbyshire Police to try and get this, you know, in place and monitored.
Okay, thanks for that, Richard. Just going back to Andy's earlier point about displacement, given the data that you've got from the Cat and Fiddle and the early data maybe from Vigelia, is there any evidence of displacement as a result of those projects being implemented? I'm looking for reassurance, if you like.
Okay, apologies, I don't have that data. I can come back to the committee if you wish. And
I think it would just...
Yeah, I mean, I can just add in that obviously on our team will be inquiries and stuff on thousands a year that come in for traffic and safety related issues. And I'm not aware of particular issues, i.e. complaints regarding rat running or diversion of volume of traffic onto other networks around those associated safer road schemes we've already done. Obviously every layout's different and unique, but in this instance I'm not aware of particular displacement issues that have been placed on my desk for attention.
Okay, thank you.
Chair, just to come back on that,
yep.
I didn't ask that question purely because there isn't the alternative for those routes that there is on the A57, and this will be a unique first time that we do this, I think.
Yeah, I'm just thinking of the 515 as an alternative to the Vargelia route, for example. You know, anyway, we are where we are at the moment. But I take your point. We still have a number of members who wish to make. Mike, you wanted to come back with
yes,
Mike Chaplin.
It came out of points that Andy Nash was raising, but I will say that on the Sheffield to Hathersage A road, Ken and I regularly see a stone wall taking a lot of punishment at Fox House, which shows
it is
that
on a right-handed bend, mind.
it is on a right-hand bend, not a left-hand bend. But did you come up with another figure? Were the full 14 speed cameras to have been installed for fatalities and serious injuries?
Okay, so the principle that we try and adopt when we're installing average speed cameras is that they appear regularly. That's so that people can visually see them in their eye line and they know that they're being monitored. Also, the number of routes that join and leave, we want them to be passing an average speed camera soon or after they've left the route from those minor side roads. The problem we've got with the A57 is that you've only got 1 or 2 roads that join it. So that has helped us to reduce the number of average speed cameras. We can always come back and seek permission to add more, but we know the impacts it will have on the special characteristics of the park, which is why we've tried to reduce the number to what we feel comfortable with, that still enforce the speed limit, still make drivers aware that they are being monitored along the route.
Thanks, Gary. And I think we appreciate both the early consultation and that appreciation of the National Park issues. So thank you. Janet Dugdale.
Thank you, and I'll reiterate Ruth's thanks for the comprehensive report. It's interesting to see how much work actually goes into looking at these schemes. I'm for anything that enhances road safety, and I'm really supportive of this scheme, particularly anything that reduces average speeds on some of these roads. I'm a regular user of the roads over between Buxton and Macclesfield and Buxton and Congleton, so I know and also over to Whaley Bridge from Buxton, so I understand the real world impact of these. It'd be nice if you could get around to doing the Taddington bypass at some stage. Just a plug here for the locals. We're fed up of motorbikes going down there 80 and nothing being done about it. Just put that out there. But I'd like to second the motion.
Okay, thank you, Janet. It's always good to see personal interest rearing its ugly head. Rachel Bennett.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, we've talked a lot about landscape visual impact, but I think it's worth noting that the other environmental impact of reducing speeds, so noise is one and particulate pollution is another, so I too am in favour of this, and yeah.
Thank you.
Happy to go.
Thank you, Rachel. Martin Beer.
Right. Looking at this and looking at the pictures of the proposed sites, the trees grow, and also for signage. Is there a plan to make sure that all the signage, all the road markings, and the speed cameras remain? Do not get covered, basically, and the road markings don't fade. Having driven here this morning, just about all the road markings are, apart from where the road has very recently been mended, are pretty much invisible.
Just to give you a bit of information, so from my perspective, obviously, just for your awareness, Derbyshire, we're doing highways transformation and we've effectively split into a commissioning and delivery model. And as part of this process, I've now got a dedicated asset team that work for me, and we're building a programme around resilience, particularly on the resilient network to start with, which includes the A57, as your example you've just touched on, around a clear indication of what assets I've got where, what condition they're in, and a programme of cyclic and managed maintenance moving forward. Now, I'm not for 1 minute going to sit here and tell you that'll be done next Thursday, but because we've got a huge network to look after. But what I'm getting around to is the fact that we're trying to put process and system in place now under this model and framework around more better management of sites, like what you're talking around, sign cleaning, vegetation clearance, road marking, a programme. You see, I'm trying to develop a strategy around where we'll have a forward programme of 3, 5, 10 years for road marking replacement. It's quite difficult because it depends on what material. I'll not bore you with it, but it depends on what type of thermoplastic material it is, how weathered it is, what it's exposed to, if it's exposed to sulphur gritting, etc., etc. It all has a bearing on the longevity around how long it lasts. But I can assure you that we are looking at processes around how we improve that aspect of maintaining what we've built moving forward.
Okay. Thank you, Richard. Charlotte, finally.
Thank you. Just
Charlotte
going back to sort of what Andy was saying, what's going to be the impact on the A6013 where, because if we've got average speed cameras all the way along Snake, they're going to turn off and come down Bamford, as they already do, at massive speeds. Is it not possible to do something there? Because that's quite a big straight road when you go past the dams where there's no houses.
Obviously, displacement's another key factor that a few of you have touched on. Now, it can be difficult because, for example, obviously all we're doing is regulating what people should be driving at. We're not putting obstacles in the way like signalising or making them stop or road traffic. I'll use the word road umps, traffic calming. We're not doing anything like that that alters or detracts from that route for them. All we're doing is saying drive at the speed limit that the road's posted at. It's not that we're altering, and I get there's people on motorbikes, high-powered and cars. We've got particular issues. I've heard of drag racing and all sorts going off across Derbyshire with certain sites. So I understand there's a societal thing that people want to speed and have a motorbike that can do. I've seen evidence. I'll give you an example. A few years ago, I've seen footage where motorbikes been doing 201 miles an hour. Now that's not appropriate. That's not safe. But that person's chose to do that. And controlling what individuals do is quite difficult in road safety engineering terms, it is. So what we have to try and do is help comply the masses, I suppose, to use the phrase, in that the majority of people will achieve compliance. So all I'm saying is, whilst we're controlling the speed that they should be driving at through camera enforcement, we're not obstructing or delaying that route by any stretch. It's just drive appropriate for conditions you're in.
I don't know that that's really going to... I don't think that answers the question, and I don't think it's really going to solve the problem that we're still going to have of bikes and cars going at excessive speeds beyond, it's already 50 miles an hour, which is probably too fast, and an area where you get a lot of tourists wandering around looking at the dams and everything. And I would also disagree that it's hard to stop the speed of traffic. We do seem to have an aversion with traffic management measures, speed humps and chicanes and everything, which in certain places, and I would argue that Bamford is one of them, would be appropriate. In Africa, they just go out and you're allowed to put a log in the middle of the road. They often do that in villages just to slow the traffic down. It works really well. They make their own chicanes. I've thought about it so often.
I think I'd find that difficult at a coroner's inquest to justify that decision, if I'm being brutal.
You're not advocating chopping down trees, are you?
Yeah. I think the point that you make, Charlotte, is taken on board, but I think we have to consider the proposals that are for the A57, and on the basis that there doesn't appear to be the displacement, I recognise that there are traffic management issues across the national park as well as across Derbyshire. We can't deal with everything all in one go, I think. Well, there is Sheffield as well, but it's a special case in so many ways, Mike. Okay, so we have had the motion both moved, proposed and seconded, but there was an alteration to suggest instead of authority,
Substitution.
best interest of the national park,
Peak District National
of the
Park.
Peak District National Park.
Yeah.
Was that acceptable to you as proposer? Well, I just think that if Peak District National Park includes those, I would say, yeah. And as seconded, Janet, so on that basis, members, of that slightly altered second recommendation, can I have a show of hands? All those in favour? Any against? Any abstentions? 3 abstentions. Thank you very much, members. That proposal has been accepted. So thank you, gentlemen, for the presentation, for your stamina and responses. Members, I'm aware that we've been in here for an hour and a quarter. I suggest a 10-minute comfort break. Is that acceptable to members? Yep. So we'll pause for 10 minutes. All right, members, if we could take our seats, please. No. Well, at the conference yesterday, I had to shout to get people, and others in the near vicinity would cover their ears. So I'm with the magnification as well. Okay, can someone shut the Mike? Would you mind closing the doors? I'm assuming that's Mike. Just educated guesses. Yes, thank you. Okay, members, it's just shy of 12 o'clock. We continue with this meeting of the authority on the 22nd of May. So agenda item 12 is next, members' training for the forthcoming year. Emily Fox, any additions that you wish to make? You may speak to it, indeed.
Morning everyone. So just a quick update to let you know that this is the annual training report for members, which is taking account of the improvements that we've been making along this journey in terms of how we're linking in training much more with the decisions that are going to be forthcoming at authority or any other committee, and also those legislation changes so that we're more timely in the training that we're having. The appendix in front of you contains the training that we're aware of in terms of 26-27, and just to note that you'll see from that appendix we've proposed a new date for the natural and cultural capital training that unfortunately we've had to move from this month due to staff changes. So once again, I really apologise that we've had to move that training, but I'm hoping that sharing those dates as early as possible with you means that you've got that visibility, and those dates will be taken forward to the AGM and put into the full calendar of member dates at that point. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Emily. Members, do you have any comments or questions? Amanda Martin.
It's more of a request. On training, where there's, we're not making any decisions or anything, it's just for information only, is it possible to have those virtual or have a hybrid approach to them?
Yes, we're quite happy to do them as hybrid where it works. On some things, for example, if we're doing more workshopy training, that may not work. But I think for the next two that we've outlined, I've already checked that we can do those as hybrid. So, yes.
Okay, thank you. Patrick Brady.
I haven't had time to look this up. Is there somewhere in the system, like in the planning code of conduct, or is it, what do they call it, planning code of something or other, something which deals with planning training that requires us to actually have it, and that disqualifies members from adjudicating on planning applications? Or is this the only place that occurs on paper? You don't understand the question I'm putting?
Yes.
Yeah.
One for you, Angela.
Yes. Actually, I don't think it is compulsory yet, although the government have been talking about making it compulsory for planning committees to have the annual training. But actually, as it stands, I don't think it is compulsory, although it is highly recommended. But it is within our scheme that whoever sits on planning committee does have planning training, because otherwise you wouldn't be able to make the decisions, sound decisions.
Okay, so we're not absolutely sure about that. I don't have any problems with any of these things as proper areas for training, don't get me wrong, and I do understand that some of them are very much more important than others. The one I think that we have a good justification for being very, very emphatic about is planning training, because we are at particular risk of challenge and inquiry if we get the planning training wrong. What I'm a little bit concerned about in this report is the suggestion that members can actually attend a full meeting of the authority, go through all the huge agenda, for example, such as we've had today, without necessarily going through any of the training that's on this thing, but they're not allowed to serve on committees. And I'm finding that a little bit odd. And I think it would be, in presentation in future, amongst other things, I think we ought to make it very clear why planning training is required. And it's not to prevent us appearing at the planning committee, it's actually to prevent us adjudicating planning applications, whether they're full authority or not. And whether we have anything in our various codes or standing orders to address that, I don't know. But the thing I feel most uncomfortable about this is the sort of thing where you can attend full authorities, but if you don't actually, I don't know, spend half an hour or whatever it is with the chair of the authority, you can't actually attend and make decisions at committee. And by the nature of things, attending at the committee is a lower level of decision making than at full authority. And I really would like to see that reviewed and us to get the balance right there.
Yeah, thanks for those comments, Patrick. Angela or Emily, do you have any comments on Patrick's suggestion?
The only thing I was going to say to that is that the induction, the new member induction is compulsory, and on there it requires Sinead provides details about all of the financial and the budgets and the internal and external audit, so there's training part of that. Equality and diversity, and then also the local plan, national park management plan, and all of the Simon's team will do that induction. So I think those things are covered. Don't know. Did you want to say anything else?
But we're not saying to somebody that because you haven't actually met with the chief executive and chair of the authority, to take the first on the list as an example, you can't attend a full meeting of the authority. And I'm quite sure that doesn't happen in any of the local authorities that comprise our membership.
Yeah, right. I can see.
I'm not saying that this training is unimportant, and it's very important in some areas. I'm just saying that it's a big step from saying this is very important training and you ought to be doing it, to saying, and by the way, you can't attend a meeting until you've done it.
Yeah.
There's a good reason for that with the planning issues. There isn't a particularly good reason with the other ones, is the point I'm making.
I can see Patrick's point that theoretically a new member could vote today without having gone through the induction process, depending on the timetabling of that induction. Is I think Patrick's point.
That's not the case.
It's not.
No.
So, yes, I do beg your pardon.
So if I've interpreted your question correctly, Patrick, on page, I think it's 125, the page number is under the table, it does make it clear that you can't participate on any committee until you've done all of that training above.
Right.
So it's not just planning committee, it would also be the full authority.
And resume. Yeah, go on. Charles is next anyway.
So by virtue of either election or
I know
appointment,
that.
there is no mechanism to prevent somebody sitting on an authority. There's no power available to do that. Your election or appointment is the power to attend. Even if you never do anything, never learn anything, which is an issue we've just run into at my constituent authority with new members' induction. One thing one lever that you could apply is to say that you cannot take up your allowances until you've done certain things, but you cannot stop them attending that full meeting of the council. And you can also stop people from sitting on committees, being appointed onto committees, because that is a power that the authority has. So you can have a barrier on sitting on committees, and you can have a barrier on the voluntary allowance scheme, but you cannot have a barrier on attending full authority, because election or appointment, that's the mechanism that puts you here, and nobody else has any power or authority to limit that.
But our interpretation of committee includes authority on the basis of what you two have said. So there's Janet, quickly. Sorry.
I just want to give clarification. This time last year we had exactly the same point raised in the same conversation, because the new means of looking at member training had come through the governance working group when I was chairing it last year, and we agreed as a membership this time last year the note under the new member induction compulsory, that new members would not be able to vote at committee, including authority, until they'd been through an induction process. So this is not something new. This was put in place this time last year.
Right. Any comments? Madam? Okay, so I hope that at least answers the question that was raised.
Does it make it right?
For me, I mean, I think we need to explore what Charles is saying there and whether that applies to national park authorities or not, because what Charles is saying is there that people can come to the authority, and we're saying in this note you can't until you've done. Well, it says you can't participate. Meetings can be viewed before then, so presumably you can come as an observer, but that's a bit different from what Charles is saying, I think.
Well, full council, full authority isn't a committee. The committee is of the
But we're interpreting
I think let's take that away. Let's take it away. Our standing orders can determine things, so and it's written in there.
The mechanism, if anything, is to say that if somebody doesn't complete that induction training, they will not, they're not eligible for the allowances. Then so you'd have to introduce that into the allowance scheme. And then the other one is that they wouldn't be allowed to sit on committee, but the other. So that would prevent them sitting on resources. Planning has then got that further.
Yes, okay, thanks for that, Charles and Patrick. Bear in mind Janet's point and the issue that Phil has raised. I think it's appropriate for Angela to take that away, discuss with Emily and come back with a resolution. Yep, okay. In which case, how does that affect the recommendation? Or do... We can take the recommendation as is, can't we?
Okay, because you're not changing any of the training events.
No, it's just the application. Okay, so can I have someone to move the recommendation? Charles, thank you. And Mike, second it. All those in favour? Any against? Any abstentions? Thank you, members. That's item 12 dealt with. Thank you, Emily. As was highlighted in Phil's report earlier, agenda item 13 has been deleted. We now move on to items for information. So item 14 is a report from the Chair of Planning Committee. Patrick, over to you.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. We've had 2 meetings since the last authority with very different agendas, one of them quite a full agenda and one of them an extremely short agenda. Applications of interest, one of them has been about an application from somebody who has an old barn which they wish to downsize into, and it has caused a lot of debate over the intentions of our own existing policies, which do say that we will look at and accommodate downsizing as a pretext for building new houses. But a lot of issues have been raised, so that particular application in the end was refused, but only after we'd had 2 meetings at it, and eventually the committee reached a conclusion. We had a rather nice application in Birchover, where a local resident, out of their own I think the word is goodwill, put in a planning application for 4 new affordable houses. I've always said that there were only 3 ways that you'd get new affordable housing. One of them is by bribery, one of them is by force, and one of them is by charity. And this is what's happened in this particular case. This particular applicant has recognised the problems in Birchover of elder population, and they've decided to provide 4 new houses on a site which raises the interesting dilemma of the difference between what is ribbon development and what is infill. But the planning committee, I think, was unanimous from memory in approving that application. We had a complex application for a listed building in a little community called Churchdale, which is just outside Ashford in the Water, where an old, I think it was 1640s listed building had a quite large 1970s garage approved next door to it, and the owner wanted to cover the garage roofs with solar panels. The conservationists said no, put the solar panels in the garden. We had a site visit, and I believe the application is now resolved. There will be solar panels on the garage roof, but they'll be carefully positioned to try and minimise the impact on the wider scene. And we had a very encouraging report on the annual report on planning enforcement, where the number of breaches resolved in the past year has dropped from, increased from 181 last year to 218 this year. And the large number of outstanding enforcement cases, some of which do go back as much as 20 years, that outstanding list now has dropped from 414 to 336, and the list is going down. That is not to say that lots of new planning enforcement issues are not arising all over the place, some of which probably haven't yet been reported, and there will be plenty more work to do in the future.
Thank you, Chair. Chairman, rather. Thank you, Patrick. I think we just note the report from the Chair of Planning Committee. Does there need to vote on it?
No.
No need to vote on it, I'm advised. So in that case, we move on to agenda item 15, which is a report from the Chair of Resources Committee. Charles.
Thanks, Chair. So we met in April, and Natalie gave us a presentation on the occupational safety and health. It always catches everybody out for being the other way around, health and safety. But, so the incidents had reduced. One of the outstanding bits of information she shared with us was the rate of staff sickness absence, which is 4.71, which is phenomenal performance, really, and it's been achieved through a much closer hands-on approach and providing more support. I think if the rest of the public sector could get remotely close to matching that, it'd be amazing. So Natalie also presented the safeguarding, the revised policy and action plan, and then we had Sue, who gave us an update on the Access for All funding. So I don't know if anybody had caught it on Country File, but we had part of the show was about the about the bike hire, the tramper hire trikes. So they were filming up at Parsley here, and I think that really helped with a bit of exposure. We also gave approval for the authority to accept funding, DEFRA funding, for up to 350,000 per annum for the coming 3 years to implement further access works. We welcomed Rob Roddy as to the meeting as head of assets and enterprise, and then for Part B, Sue presented on some of the project risks around Access for All projects. As that's Part B, if you want to look at the details for that, it's on the restricted minutes. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Charles. Again, if there aren't any comments, we can note the report without without voting on it. So thank you, Charles, for that report. There is item 16 then, a single report from outside bodies, a joint one from Janet Dugdale and Ruth Swetnam on the National Park Foundation, unless there is anything to add, Ruth or Janet?
No, it's just a really helpful context and segue into the next item.
Indeed, indeed. You took the very words out of my mouth, but that's not unusual. And Matt Buckler.
Obviously I haven't done a report for the Campaign for National Parks, but I just wanted to, I couldn't go, they have one meeting a year and I couldn't go to it at the last minute. But it's worth flagging about the report that they released a couple of weeks ago around governance. And the Peak District was specifically raised partly because some of the good things that we've done and some of the good things that we've been working on, but they were saying about the size of boards being a particular issue. And we have the biggest one. And so, I will write a fuller report of it on Who does that go to?
Would come to, if it's a outside body and conference feedback, it would go to Democratic Services, I think. Yep. So thank you for that. But it's worth noting, since you raised it, that there is a roundtable meeting with the Minister, Mary Cray, on the 9th of June, I think it is, which will be attended by both CNP and National Parks England. And Hannah Corran, as a young member, has been invited to attend as well, to input to some of the aspects. And it was our intention to be meeting with Hannah this afternoon, but she has a health issue, so has absented herself from today's meeting. But we will try and touch base with her before her meeting. Yes, there has been a set of responses to the CNP report, not all of them complimentary, for various reasons, but in the main, most of the principles that are in there, like the size of the board, is exactly the kind of things that we've already made representation to government about, with a view to reductions. And one hopes that in the course of local government reorganisation, for example, that note will be taken both of our comments and the need for review of those numbers anyway, and the regulations that govern them, the 2015 regulations. Janet,
Can I just add for members' information, in addition to the CNP report on governance, there's been a DEFRA funded research activity undertaken through the University of Gloucestershire, where they've looked at the soft governance side, and large numbers of participants in national parks took part in workshops over January and February. And the report from that is, I think, coming out in the next couple of weeks. So that will be adding more information above and beyond and in addition to the CNP report.
And there's the third one as well, is the OES. I can't remember what the initials stand for.
Office for Environmental Protection.
That's right. Office for Environmental Protection is also running the rule over governance. So it's like buses, it would seem. There aren't any for a long time, and then suddenly 3 come along. So we await not only the reports, but whatever might flow from them. Okay, thank you, Ruth, Janet. There is a second report from outside body, a substantial report that Mike Sawkins is going to speak to. Mike, I understand. Here you come. You can either sit or stand, whichever you feel comfortable.
Perfect, thank you.
Yeah, okay.
Afternoon, everybody. So I'm Mike Sawkins, part of the team at the Foundation, just here to hopefully bring the report to life a little bit and give a flavour of what we've been doing for the last year or so. Starting on the financial side, I guess, in terms of income, in 25-26 we raised just over £925,000. Which is an increase of about 50% on the previous year, which is obviously very exciting from our point of view, to have had such a good year. In terms of where that's come from, 44% of it ultimately is donations from individuals raised in one way or another. And that's everything from people maybe giving £2 a month to much larger donors giving really substantial sums. About 31% from charitable trusts and foundations in the form of grants, 22% from corporate partnerships and donations, and then a small amount from gift aid. And I think one of the things that we're really pleased about is that represents a real diversification of income year on year. So the prior year, more than 2/3 of our income came from individuals, and a significant proportion of it from one or two individuals. So to be diversifying our income and have a much more robust, sustainable mix is great. In terms of how the money was spent, so just under £780,000 of grant payments out to our delivery partners. That's, again, a substantial increase on the year before. It's slightly less than the 50%, and that's really just to do with the nature of the way we work, that we always have to raise the money before we can award it out as a grant and spend it. So there's a slight lag, but that will absolutely catch up and reach that 50% level as well. We are increasingly working with a broader range of partners, but the authority remains our key delivery partner and received around 80% of the grant funding that we awarded last year, just over £630,000. And I guess putting myself in your shoes, one of the questions I'd want to know is about return on investment in terms of the financial contribution that the authority makes to the foundation. And the good news is that it's comfortably more than 4 to 1. So every pound you're putting into the authority in cash or in kind is generating, I think, something like £4.25 in inward grant funding for projects. You've obviously had a full list of all the grants we made, all the projects we're involved in. I don't have time to go through them all, but I wanted to just highlight a couple, I guess, that we are particularly excited about. Some of which you may have heard about. Apologies if I'm telling you things you already know. But People of the Peak is one of the big projects we've got going on at the moment. So we know the national park is home to a huge array of heritage features and sites, including almost 500 scheduled monuments and more than 2,500 listed buildings. We know that there are increasing threats to the state of these, but the reality is that staff capacity, both at the authority and elsewhere, has had a real limiting factor on how well these sites have been able to be monitored. And it means we don't really have a clear picture of the state of heritage in the park, and we're certainly missing opportunities to intervene early to prevent them from declining. And People of the Peak is all about addressing that, essentially. So it's an ambitious project. It's a partnership between the foundation and the authority. And it's about establishing a large-scale monitoring and conservation programme delivered by volunteers for heritage in the park. And within that, focusing particularly on diversifying who's engaged with heritage, who's volunteering in cultural heritage, and hopefully providing lessons that can be applied across volunteering with the park more generally, particularly looking at younger people and ethnically diverse communities. For those of you that aren't familiar with the way the Heritage Fund, who are the major funder for this, fund their projects, they always fund in 2 phases. There's a development phase and a delivery phase. We are currently in an 18-month delivery phase, receiving just over £200,000 from the Heritage Fund. And this is all about consultation, piloting, testing, developing the detailed plans for the real meat of the project delivery, and allowing us to develop the documents we need to put in an application that has the best possible chance of success. If we are successful, the delivery phase, we're expecting a grant of around £800,000 from the Heritage Fund, and that will include launching a £200,000 community heritage grant fund that the foundation will deliver for those projects that are beyond the scope of being delivered by volunteers. The second project I wanted to talk about was landscape trees. So we know that the White Peak has these pockets of incredibly rich habitat in the wooded dales, but we know that on the limestone plateau between and around those dales, the tree cover is very low, and many of the trees that are there are ash, and we expect to lose most of those to ash dieback. What that means is that wildlife can't move between those quite isolated pockets of woodland. They struggle to feed, breed and thrive in the landscape. And although there are tree planting funding schemes out there, they are typically focused on woodland and often relatively large areas of woodland, which is just not appropriate for the landscape, which is very heavily dominated by productive farmland. So landscape trees is providing a different approach. This is all about planting individual trees and small copses in and around field margins, providing funding and support to farmers and landowners to do that. It's being delivered by the authority. In the last financial year, we made an initial grant from the foundation of £55,000. We've now got just over £110,000 in total for that project, aiming to plant around 2,500 trees by March next year, which will enable bats, birds, amphibians to move through the landscape. And something certainly I've learned from involvement through this project is actually those standalone trees are quite a distinct and important habitat in their own right compared to trees in woodland. Very different light levels, very different surroundings, and it allows different species to thrive and to make those spaces their home. Finally, I wanted to talk about Landscapes Unlocked. So the authority has an incredible collection of images. We think probably more like 44,000 now, predominantly from the founding of the park through to perhaps 10 or 15 years ago, but with some of them going back to the 30s. And really what this has come from is the fact that the Peak District was the only park, as far as we're aware, in the UK that ever had an in-house photography and design team, and that's where the bulk of this imagery has come from. It's an amazing collection, but until recently it's been sat up in the attic here. I think it would be fair to say sort of slightly unloved. So this project, which is a partnership between the Foundation, the Authority and the Derbyshire Record Office, is all about preserving, cataloguing, protecting that collection so that it's around for generations to come. And taking 3,000 of the best and most interesting images, digitising them and making them freely available online. And as I say, as you might expect, this would be the first publicly accessible image collection from a national park in the UK, which is great, and something that the National Archives are very interested in terms of the wider implications. We've had a £45,000 grant through Archives Revealed, which is a collaboration between all the various funders listed there. And in this case, all three partners have made a cash contribution into the project as well, which is great. It's a really nice example of a kind of broader partnership coming together to do something really exciting. And beyond just the aesthetic value of the images, we've got academics who are interested in using the collection to study landscape change in response to kind of climate change and other factors. It's an incredible resource for studying the history and heritage of the park, social change. We've had interest from artists and arts organisations who want to find creative ways to get people engaged with the landscape. Huge potential to do stuff off the back of this resource, and within the project we'll be holding a public exhibition at Buxton International Festival and then at the Bakewell National Park Centre from July, and we're also developing a resource pack for schools. And then the final thing I wanted to say, I guess, was our door is literally and metaphorically open. We're always very happy to talk to members who want to understand more about who the Foundation are, what we do, how we work, what projects we've got in the pipeline, how we might work, continue to work well with the authority in the future. So we're based here at Alden House. Please come and see us, or you can email us, call us. We're always very happy to speak to people. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Mike. And congratulations on raising the 900,000.
Thank you.
Let's hope it continues. Members, any questions or comments? Mandy Martin.
Thank you. I just wanted to first of all say, great report. It was really clear and very uplifting reading this. It was one of the highlights from the pack, I thought, this month. Clearly it's going from strength to strength, which is great to see. I'm just curious about the ambition for the future and other sources of revenue that you might be looking at. You know, for example, the Queen Elizabeth Trust. Is there any opportunity to go after money there?
In terms of that trust specifically, not something we've had a chance to look at as yet. In terms of wider ambitions, you know, absolutely, in general terms, we absolutely want to continue to grow. I think we recognise that the growth that's happened into 25-26, although it's fantastic news, has come from a relatively small number of significant windfalls. So we shouldn't assume that we will continue to see huge steps in income like that. There is a period, I think, of a little bit of consolidation and trying to continue broadening that supporter base so that it's more sustainable and not dependent on such a small number of high value relationships. We've been working to a strategy covering the 5-year grant agreement period we have with the authority, and the ambition for that strategy was to hit £1 million of income. So in a sense, we've almost got there 2 years early. So we're in a period, I guess, of reflection now to say, well, how much more potential is there in the next couple of years, and starting to look beyond that. So I'm sorry, that's not hugely definitive, but yeah, that's
helpful. Is there anything more that the authority should be doing to help or support or help manage risks or challenges? Is that a bad question, Janet?
I think one of the things that there's still, I think where we've seen real progress, but there's probably still work that could be done, is the sort of pipeline and supply of projects for us to fundraise for. The nature of the way we work is we need ideas, we need opportunities to be coming from other people and other organisations, the authority included. And I think there's probably still work to be done on improving that flow through of ideas and information so that we're hearing about the opportunities that teams are spotting on the ground to make a difference.
Okay, thank you for that. Thank you, Mike, for the answers. Any other comments or questions? Janet O'Dowd.
Just to follow up from Mandy, the Foundation's in a position where the funding from the authority is tailing off, and so we've been, as I'm a trustee there along with Ruth, but we're looking at with the foundation and the trustees what that relationship means as that happens, which is why Mike's question was a sort of answer, was a sort of holding pattern to that. I just want to make a couple of comments. First of all, it is a pretty small team in the foundation, and to be fundraising at the levels you're fundraising at and delivering and helping deliver and facilitate that, you really are an organisation that's punching above your weight. So it's great to see so much coming from so few of you. But I do have a question. You say on the operational side, one of the things you're trying to do is raise the profile of the foundation in the National Park, Sheffield and Manchester. So how are you measuring whether you've raised the profile or not? What's the deliverable from that?
So the two elements to that, I guess, and we are just, for context, we are just in the process of finalising and signing off our first ever communication strategy. So the first time we've had a really structured, proactive approach to this. So two key elements to that, I guess. One is looking at growing our own audiences, so those who follow us on social media, those who are subscribed to our newsletter, number of people visiting the website, so understanding and measuring the number of people who are actively engaging with the communication we're putting out, and ultimately hoping that translates into more donors, obviously. The other thing that we're planning to do within that strategy is do some broader market research, so actually do some surveying around public awareness of the foundation now as a baseline, and then track that growth over the next couple of years. And you would hope to see, obviously, that more people would be aware of it. That's the in terms of that more sustainable income base, and focusing on, in some ways, focusing on diversifying income more than necessarily continuing to grow it rapidly at this stage. It's about that lower level support from a large number of people that is much less susceptible to fluctuations in, say, an individual circumstance, or less dependent on a specific project.
Okay, thank you, Mike. Any other comments or questions? If not, we have a recommendation before us. Can I have someone to move that recommendation? Mandy, thank you. Andy, seconded. All those in favour? Thank you. Any against? Any abstentions? Thank you, members. That's moved. Thank you, Mike, for that presentation. Members, we now move on to agenda item 18, the Moors for the Future Partnership Business and Delivery Plan 26-27, and Matt Scott Campbell for a presentation, a brief presentation.
Yes. As long as you'd like it.
No. That's.
Brief would be good.
Yep.
Good morning, members. Nice to be with you and bring the Moors for Future Business and Delivery Plan for the year ahead. It'll be a bit of a look ahead to 26-27 and setting out a high-level plan for the work that we'll be working on. So we've got a very full and ambitious programme this year. I'm really pleased about that. And within that, we've got secure funding, which is essential, and very interestingly, over 90% of that now is linked to outcomes in the water environment. And I suppose I've been waiting for that to happen for a long time, because being a wetland, you'd expect there to be recognition about the value of water. So I think we can really see that in the way we're funded now. We are a growing team. Currently, we've got 35 full-time equivalents, but we are actively recruiting for more people at the moment to help us deliver our programme over the next coming years. We still enjoy really strong support from our partners, and indeed that's growing to now include partners like National Highways. Again, after recognition that nature as critical infrastructure has really big resilience outcomes for actual built infrastructure and things like that as well. So really good to see new partners, new funding, more overlap of income and outcomes occurring in the programme. So in terms of our conservation programme for this year, we are aiming to deliver about £6 million worth of capital works. That's growth on our previous largest year, so we are excited to try and move up the scale and pace of restoration with that. We expect to be working on 14 sites, and last year we did something like 12,500 hectares worth of survey. So we're sat on a lot of data to run out with the work that we're doing. And we should also be doing quite a lot more survey for the next year and the following years as well. So a really busy programme there. In terms of the delivery profile for the next 5 years, our first year, 2025-26, last year was kind of coming up to speed because it takes a while to secure the funding when AMP cycles swap over. And we're only really able to work from January onwards. So this year will be hopefully us coming right up to tempo with our programme for the next couple of years, and then we expect it'll stay pretty consistent, tailing off towards the end of 2030. But by that time, we would have no doubt been endeavouring to secure further funding. So yeah, an interesting and full capital delivery programme for the year ahead. In terms of science, this is really important, particularly because we've always been evidence-led around how we do this conservation work, and that's vital for us. But working with kind of a diverse and blended funding model now, which includes corporates with water outcomes, as I mentioned, there's a really significant KPI and monitoring aspect now. So our science and monitoring programme is actually part of how we are evidencing what we're achieving for the funding that we are working with. So really important that that's in there. And we're also an interesting point in I guess the conservation and restoration journey, in that we've been successful as a partnership in moving the habitats out of a place where they were completely destroyed ecosystems to a point there is a functioning ecosystem there, not fully functioning, but it's coming back to a place where protected species are moving back in. And we need to really understand what's happening in those ecosystems from this point forward. So our science is really leaning into kind of the bottom levels of those ecosystems. So invertebrates and microbes and things like that, those are really great indicators of ecosystem function and health. And so we've got a number of PhDs running this year on those things, and for the next couple of years, so we can increasingly engage with that complexity. And I guess as a nerdy ecologist, that's going to be really interesting for myself and the team, and perhaps for our colleagues and members as well. Communications is more important perhaps than ever before, particularly around the challenges we face around behaviours and wildfire risk. So we are really pushing our programme to reach as many new audiences as we possibly can, using social media and films and our traditional face-to-face engagement tools as well, like the Bogtastic van. We're also developing the Moreland Centre proposition. We'd like to see that become an asset that's a real vehicle for us to achieve some of our comms and engagement outcomes, but also working again with more and more corporate and private sector funders. It's also a place where we can do business. And actually, one of the things we note from working with a widening group of corporate partners is they really want connection with the team. I think, and a space for them to do that, for them to bring their own teams, is something that we can really see a need for and an opportunity. So excited for that. Also in comms, we've got lots of case studies running about us, which is really interesting. And actually, it's not just the actual conservation and science and comms aspects of it, it's the nature finance aspects of it that the case studies are really focusing in on now. And I think as an authority and as a partnership, we are certainly being seen as leaders in the arena of nature finance, particularly with projects like Coombs Moss, but also seeking to work with more institutional investors and understanding nature as critical infrastructure. These are all themes that I'm really pleased to say that we're on top of and getting opportunities to share what we know and attract other partners to work with us. The comms part of that as well, in terms of marketing, is really important around that green finance piece. So we'll continue with that this year as well. Live project delivery, as I've said, is something around about 6 million, and the majority of that is water company funding. There is other funding in the pot, and we're estimating about $500,000 around that point from National Highways. And we're hoping to, as I say, work on a more of a return on investment based model, particularly around an area of Stalybridge, which had been suffered a wildfire back in 2018, for those that can remember that. So we'll see how those two pan out. There's some work to be done, certainly on the last one, to see how that goes. In terms of what we call core vision and enabling funding, this is where we're working with donations and things like that. We've set ourselves a target of around about this for the year ahead. And this money's actually been really important in recent years because things like the comms activity and science activity is pretty hard to fund as compared to some of the capital stuff. So our business development work and fundraising in this area, this allows us to do some of the comms that I was talking about. This is where the money's coming from, and some of that science as well. And in fact, many will be aware that there was a really damaging wildfire on Ashop a couple of weeks ago, and you never plan to. You can't plan to instrument a site out and hope that at some point there's a damaging fire and then collect some data. But on that, within the last week, we've used some of this funding to buy some really decent monitoring kit so that we can fully count the cost in terms of water quality down the Ashop catchment. And that will, down the line, help us work with water company partners to help them understand what the full cost of suffering a wildfire is, because at the moment, I suppose, the cost is not fully understood. It's spoken about in terms of the actual activity cost to put the fire out, but counting the cost of the carbon impact, the water quality impact, the air quality impact, the biodiversity impacts, this is how we're going to make the business case for avoidance. We need to show that the cost of suffering one is far greater than avoiding it through good engagement and those types of things. In terms of business development, still really focusing around blended finance. There will be opportunities for DEFRA funding, although they are much fewer than they were in the past. So I'm really glad that our programme has migrated our focus into working with a really diversified blend of funding, and we'll continue to work on that. And as I was saying, we are getting invited to lots of events and to speak at lots of things because we do stand out as an example of where this is working, and where there's a group of engaged partners that are trying things and having some success in working with new ways of funding things. In terms of risk and capacity for this year, the biggest risk that I guess that we're aware of is around capacity in the contracting sector. So we work a lot with specialist contractors and suppliers, and through planning we're able to kind of mitigate a lot of that risk. But we are asking them to grow with our programme, and so we're doing things quite intentionally about helping that to happen. And so, for example, we've already got our framework contracts all locked in for the next 5 years, and got as many people onto that framework as we possibly can. We're going to run another contractor day in about a month. So we did one last year, and all the contractors that we worked with, about 40 companies, came to that. And at that, we're showing them the programme for the year ahead and explaining when our tendering dates will come out so that they can really get themselves ready to get their tenders in for the work that they want to do. And we should be trying to award work in multi-year contracts as well, so that they've got confidence and can plan in their businesses. And members also might be aware that DEFRA have launched a peatland sector capacity grant, which is up to £20,000, and that can be applied for by anyone, including commercial organisations like contractors. And they're relatively small grants of like up to £20,000, but if you're a specialist contractor, that is the ability to hire another digger for a year and possibly doubling your ability to take on work for the season to come. So we're going to be, raising that with our contractors so they're aware of it, know how to access it, and we shall certainly help them apply for things if they're minded to. So we're on it with things, and to a degree we have to push and see how we go. And within the programme of the next few years, we've got some contingency so we can smooth and level the programme out. But we want to aim for as much as we can, and let's see how they get on. Let's see how we do. So just, to wrap it up, really optimistic and confident about the year ahead. I think we've got sound foundations. We've got an amazing team of really talented and committed people, and I'm really privileged and humbled to work with them, all of them. And we'll be backing them up with really strong management and control for the year ahead, and then just keeping an eye on that contingency, like I was saying. So, thanks for your attention, and really happy for any questions.
Thanks, Matt. That's good to hear. So many levels of scope, scale, ambition, and opportunities. Some of the and the ways in which you're moving forward with the project. Members, any comments or questions? Ruth Swetnam.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks, Matt. I mean, can I just congratulate the whole team? I mean, this is an exemplar for nature-based solutions and delivery, and we as a board are very proud of you. I'm sure members would agree with me. I did just want to, you mentioned about your comms, and I did actually get round to sitting down and watching your Goyt Valley film. And can I please urge every member who has not watched it to just take that 15 minutes, 20 minutes to watch it, because I knew about fires, but the devastation of the Goyt Valley, and I think it's incredibly important that message. I mean, personally, I would like to see every single person who lives in the national park, every single person who steps foot into it, sit down and watch that film, because I thought it was fantastic, and I just wanted to give you that feedback. So I'll be really pleased to see how that comms plan develops, because we've talked about wildfire. We've also discussed what's wildfire and what isn't. I mean, it really is inspiring work, and, leading that green finance piece, obviously, is really critical. The question I have actually relates to the specialist contractors, and that's brilliant to see that you are, really developing something. And I think a lot of people don't realise that those are also green skills, aren't they? It's not only the green skills that Matt's team have as, ecologists and team, but green skills are necessary in the construction industry as well. And I think that's a really fantastically important message to get out. Is any of that actually being delivered by companies who are resident in the national park? Is some of that money coming into the national park for our residents?
Good question, and the answer is yes. So there's lots of farmers, and land managers, and one of the things we're really trying to do and enable is if the land managers and farmers on the land that we're working can be involved in the project delivery in any way, we do that. And that's things like storage and moving things about. These guys know the hill better than we do. So we definitely do try and do that. And then there are local firms that we work with that employ local folks as well. So yes, there is that local economy aspect in terms of a boost from a programme of this size. If we're trying to outturn £6 million this year, a good chunk of that will find its way into the local economy. And I think what you were saying about green skills is really timely, because one of the things that we're doing now for the first time is we're going to take some apprentices on in the Moors for the Future team, because we recognise the succession of skills that are needed, and I think there's probably 15 to 20 years more of focus needed around this. If we, I'd like it to be less, but I think so there's careers here. There are careers here for people, good careers needed skill sets, and so we're going to try and do that. And actually, there's something about having, I think, early career stage people within a team that helps everyone else realise within a team that continuous improvement and learning, lifelong learning through your career, is a really important thing. There's something about teaching and showing others, which I'm hoping has a really positive impact on our team. So I've got my colleagues in the programme team to thank for that. They're really enthusiastic about it, and we're looking to do that. But I think we're also going to be saying to our contractors, have you guys thought about apprenticeships? We'd like to support you with that. Do you want to bring, and maybe some of our apprentices can go and do a placement with those guys. They can, what's possible. We're going to be asking that of ourselves and our contractors in the next couple of years, so that we've got that, people coming into the sector.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, Matt. And once again, Ruth, you've in mentioning the film, you've mentioned the item I was reserving. I fully endorse your comments. It's a really, really good watch in a sense of getting across the enormity of the impacts of moorland fires. Matt Buckler.
Yeah, again, I would like to echo the point about congratulations on the scale of the work. At the last meeting I said about, we talked about green finance at the last meeting, and I said about how the National Park has got the exemplar of how you develop a nature-based economy and how you do green finance and the work with National Highways and the water companies. Delivering nature-based solutions is the mechanism to do it. It's great to see. It's great to see. I would like to propose the recommendation.
Okay, thank you, Matt. The recommendation has been proposed, unless there are any further comments. Seconded by Andy Nash. All those in favour? Any against? Any abstentions? Thank you, members, and congratulations, and all the best for a successful year.
Yeah, thanks, members, and thanks for those comments. I'll pass all of those back to the team. They, I do say to them, there's a lot of support, and the members are really interested. So I will feed that back, and thank you, and thanks for the comments about the film as well. I mean, it's powerful, isn't it? That film. Phil and I were there at the screening of it when it was first premiered, and yeah, those images I hope will connect with people and realise it's a really important thing that we focus on.
Sure.
Thanks, everybody.
Yep, thanks, Matt. I'm aware of the time, members. It's 5:01. I have to ask for approval for continuing past 1 o'clock. Everyone in favour of doing that? Just a show of hands. Thank you very much. It's my intention to take the next couple of items and then we'll break for lunch and have to come back after lunch for part B. In which case we have agenda item 19, incorporating biodiversity duty into Peak District National Park Management Plan 23-28. And Brian Taylor is going to say a few words of additional explanation. Or that's what he told me anyway.
Good afternoon. Yeah, so not a presentation, so it's just to clarify a couple of points on this report. So first, I just need to confirm that it's not a decision item, despite the wording in the first line. This is a requirement of DEFRA. So this item has been moved to information items so that we can just describe the proposed approach to reporting on biodiversity. Hence the recommendations are to note the reports, appendices that are there. So just to be clear on what this report is about. We have recently used the members' forums to describe the emerging work on biodiversity net gain and how we feel we could make use of habitat land banks and green finance in the ways that Matt's just described, including the legal frameworks that we'd need to set up to guarantee those gains across the park. That's either through the planning system or through those bigger projects like you've just heard about. We describe the challenges that will bring in terms of monitoring and resourcing over time, and we're still working on that paper. So that's a paper that will come to the authority in July to describe how we intend to approach those mechanics further. So this report today really reflects a separate legal duty on us, in addition to the mechanics of BNG and land banks. A duty in the Environment Act 2021, which introduced a strengthened biodiversity duty requiring all public authorities in England to consider what they could do to conserve and enhance biodiversity. And that's obviously government departments, public bodies, agencies, local authorities, planning authorities and statutory undertakers. And it says each public authority must consider what it can do to conserve and enhance biodiversity, agree policies and specific objectives based on its considerations, and act to deliver on those policies and achieve those objectives. It was in the same legislation, that Environment Act 2021, that the BNG system emerged, requiring all planning permissions granted under the Town and Country Planning Act, with some exemptions, that they are required to deliver at least 10% biodiversity net gain, and that was from February 2024. And there was a separate small sites requirement to that in April 2024. And all sites, all off-site and significant on-site habitats must be secured for at least 30 years. So there's really strengthened mechanisms over strategic time periods for that. In addition to BNG, the management plan also includes aims for nature recovery, and a range of projects and plans are emerging which demonstrate the local commitment to biodiversity and nature recovery in the Peak District. Just heard about the Moors for Future Partnership. We've got the Farming and Protected Landscape Scheme, Morridge Hill Country you'll be hearing about. Landscape Trees was mentioned before, which is around our farm advice work. And all contextualised by our nature recovery plan, which covers overarching aims for nature recovery and also serves as that connection point to the statutory local nature recovery strategies that are being prepared by counties and combined authorities. As well as, you know, amazing new work like the Landscape Observatory and monitoring and all those things. So it's a chance for us to bring some of that overview together, and it explains what the expectation of DEFRA, that reporting a biodiversity duty should take place, importantly within the monitoring of the National Park Management Plan. So one of the explanations in the paper says that the strategy and performance team will be working to align this statutory duty within future reviews of the management plan. So this is just a first report and meets the initial deadline set by DEFRA. Future reports must be within 5 years of this one, and it's proposed that a full and comprehensive report will be produced in each management plan cycle, so they'll start to align. And the appendices include that overview biodiversity duty statement, plus a specific BNG document which just tells you what's happened so far in terms of BNG coming through the planning system. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Thank you, Brian. Any comments or questions, members? Matt Buckler?
Yeah, the first comment is for members to sort of think. If you look at the report from Mycelia around BNG, you realise, you know, what we've said, because of the level of development within the national park, BNG is not going to reverse, is not going to deliver nature recovery within the national park, because it's not possible to do it. You know, it's what, 0.2 habitat units off-site. So, you know, that's a tenth of a hectare. So it's not going to be, BNG is not going to be the mechanism for delivering nature recovery within the Peak District. I had a specific question about the irreplaceable habitats thing. Was that did that relate to the Kinder Scout footpath project?
I would have to check that, Matt, but that would make sense in terms of that case. That's the figures.
Because I don't know if members can. I don't know if members can remember it. We had it came to planning committee where putting a flagstone path on Kinder Scout is one of the most impactful, most positively impactful things that we could do for nature recovery on Kinder Scout, but it was covered by the biodiversity net gain legislation because it was loss of irreplaceable habitat, because even though it's bare peat and you put a flagstone on it, it can't then go back to being blanket bog, even though it was never going to go back to being blanket bog. So we've had conversations with, I've had conversations with Natural England around that, because that should be excluded from the BNG legislation, and I think it's one of the things that is being excluded from the BNG legislation, which means that there's going to be no work on irreplaceable habitats that's covered by the BNG legislation once those sort of things go. So again, it goes back to the point, it's not a, we need to be thinking around, don't get overexcited around BNG as a mechanism for delivering nature recovery in the national park.
I think we'll try our best not to, but thank you for thank you for those comments, Matt. Just very relevant.
Just in addition to that, obviously the government are looking at the practicalities, and the viability and impact of BNG requirements on development, and it's obviously trying to free up development and make more things happen at the moment. So obviously the thresholds have been increased, so there's less ability to use BNG at smaller site level. So.
Okay, any other comments or questions? If not, we have a set of recommendations. We have someone to move those recommendations. Charles, thank you. Martin seconded them. All those in favour? Any against? Any abstentions? Thank you, members. That's approved in that case. We can move hastily on to agenda item 20, which just notes that I finish my term of office at the end of June because my time as a member also expires, so one follows the other. I'm quite happy to go to lunch now, but Janet has insisted on saying something, so I'm afraid there appears to be my personal medieval style trial by ordeal for a few moments. Janet.
Yeah, thank you, members. It actually falls on me officially as Deputy Chair to do this. As you know, when members leave, they get a certificate of appreciation, and that's what I'm here to award to Ken. Now, Ken actually came to the authority in 1982 as an officer. So he's been knocking around for a while now, 44 years. And of that 44 years, 43 of them have been spent with the authority. 35 years as an officer in cultural heritage. And then I think they probably made a big fuss of him and thought, he's gone. He had a gap year, and then he came back as a DEFRA member, and he's been here as a member for 8 years. We were obviously delighted to have him back. He was selected, and he's done a fabulous job, as we all know. So I'm still reeling from the fact that he's a Def Leppard fan, to be honest.
I didn't say that. I just happen to know.
I think you are. I'm surprised I didn't see you at their concert in 1979 in Hanley, where they were supporting UFO. But anyway,
how do you know I wasn't there?
No, well, I was. It's even more of a surprise. Right. Okay. So, I mean, Ken, I also tried to find people who were here when Ken first joined the authority in 1982, and actually there aren't any. There aren't even any members who were here when Ken joined in 1982. I mean, even Kath, who can't be here today, even she wasn't a member back then, and she's been here for nearly 30 years. So it shows how long he's been here. You could almost say he's part of the fabric or the DNA or the organisational cultural heritage of the organisation. He's been here for... Have I milked you being here for a long time yet?
I think you've got the point across.
Okay,
yeah,
good, okay. So before I give him his certificate, which lists all the things he's done for us as a member, it's a bit factual, it tells us which committees he's been on and all of this sort of thing, which is great. But actually, I wanted to sort of think a little bit more about what the sort of soft side of his contribution has been to the authority. And I've come up with a few. And the first is actually organisational memory. And we as members, we come and go. We might be here for a few years and then we come off. And I've been here, this is my 7th year now, so I've seen, the same thoughts coming up from new members that I might have had when I first joined. We've had a really great opportunity with Ken to have that long-term organisational memory of knowing what things were like and having that context within which we're making decisions now. And I think that's something that really is incredibly valuable to the organisation. But he future thinks as well. He doesn't just bang on about the past the whole time.
Thank you, Janet.
Thank you. The second I do want to draw out, I mean, he's a national expert in cultural heritage, and he will know more about the Peak District in this area in terms of cultural heritage than probably anybody. And he's involved in many bodies outside of this one in relation to archaeology and cultural heritage. I think one of these great achievements is that we don't, at this park, just talk about the importance of nature and nature restoration, or nature and landscape. We talk about nature, landscape and cultural heritage, and it's now part of our mindset that those three things are embedded and combined and work together. It's not just one, it's the multivarious aspects of environment, nature, humans, human activity, past, present and future. And Ken has been instrumental in building that mindset and that psyche within us all. And the third thing I want to pick up in terms of his reflection on his sort of wider contribution as a member is his ongoing and unyielding commitment to this organisation. He read, and even today he said, yes, I've read all the management plan all the way through. Yes, I've done. He prepares, he turns up, he's there. And he's been dedicated and committed to this organisation, whether as an officer, a member, or more recently as chair. And he's put in the hours and he takes it very, very seriously. And within that, he doesn't just skim over things. He really does look at things with a sort of forensic level of detail. I mean, some could call it pedantry.
Most do.
Most do. But it's an important attribute to have amongst members, that, you know, that scrutiny is happening and it's taken seriously. So, commend you for that. Now, the final bit is the last 3 years, as you know, Ken has been our chair. And I just want to have some reflections for you on your performance as chair.
Oh, blimey.
Now, this isn't an appraisal, it's a valedictory, so it's all positive, so don't worry.
Oh, right, okay.
Okay, so don't panic, all right? And a few members have given me a few bits of feedback. It's all been good, don't panic. I think the first thing to note is Ken was never seeking power. He wasn't hungry to be chair. He wasn't looking at this for some personal ambition or to get his name out there or to be heard. He was very much encouraged to put himself forward for chair. And I think that's been reflected in how he has chaired. Because when I was thinking about what the type of chairing and the type of leadership he's shown, what he's shown to me is integrity and humility in those roles. It's not been about what matters to him, it's been what's been best for the authority in the national park. And I think that's a hugely commendable way to operate and to behave. And it's been an absolute pleasure to operate with you as deputy under that mindset. He also has brought to the chair and the authority a really positive mental attitude. He seems almost unshakable in his optimism even now, we've been here for a while, and he's still got a smile on his face. And he looks for the good, he looks for the good in contributions, he looks for the good in how people are engaging and what the agenda is. And I think that positive mental attitude is fantastic. And I also like the fact he sometimes laughs at my jokes as well. So he's obviously got a really good sense of humour. And I think that brings to bear real positivity in terms of how our meetings and how our engagements as members have worked out. Now, it's only the 22nd of May and he's still got another 5 weeks to go. So we will see him again. He's not going to disappear after today because he's got to get through all of Part B. And then there's going to be a long members forum talking about the local plan. And he's still got planning committee and resources committee. He's coming on the members tour. So we will see plenty of him. And he's also going to be at the garden party on the 22nd of July. But today is the day where we formally note that it's his final authority meeting. And so I get to give you your certificate now. But personally, Ken, it's been an absolute blast being your deputy. And I am going to miss you.
Oh, that's nice. I should miss you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a hug.
Right, Thank you, members. It's really well appreciated, but I'll try not to keep you from lunch. It's always interesting getting other people's observations about oneself, particularly when there's no formal assessment or appraisal process for the chair. And so one operates almost in a vacuum of not knowing and just hoping that because no one has kicked you, that you haven't done too many things wrong. But it is also, I think, a bit strange to get, as Janet has indicated, a kind of valedictory message when one's still got the best part of 6 weeks to go. That is a bit weird. Yeah, I smile, yeah. Sometimes people can't tell the difference between a smile and a Richter's grin, but that's and as for appreciating Janet's jokes, flattery gets you a long way. But yeah, they are amusing, mostly, yeah. But thank you. I think you've picked on the issues I was going to just point out. Yeah, I've been here a long time. It's time for me to go. My time has expired. And I think it's only right and proper that there is churn, that members do move on, no matter how good or otherwise they might be. And I think that was embodied in the submission that we made to government, that all members ought to have that changeover. It's got to be for the better for the organisation. And I did then, and I certainly endorse that view now. I think organisational memory is an interesting one, not least from my perspective, because one tends to see that what goes around comes around. But nobody seems to like being reminded or told, oh, we did that 25 years ago, and these were the results. And, oh, no, it's different now. Things like that. And yeah, heavens above, if I wasn't committed to the National Park and the National Park Authority, I wouldn't have been here for 43 years. So, I mean, that's just the way I am. I remember Patrick's first comment to me when I came back as a member was, can't keep away, eh? And yeah, to an extent it's true, and I don't deny it. And it's, as I said to some people at the time, it's, as far as I'm concerned, it's unfinished business. It remains unfinished business because this is an iterative process. It's an organic organisation. It's organic in the way we operate, the way we function. And we have to respond to the various internal and external stimuli that occur. Resourcing, always an issue, but changing imperatives, changing priorities, ones that we generate ourselves and ones that are imposed upon us. Some of which we can live with, some like the an outcomes framework, criteria that we have no control over, yet we're being judged on things we have no influence on. It's difficult at times. I think that from my perspective, I've really appreciated the support that members have given me, the support I've been able to give to previous chairs, previous chief execs. I was doing on the back of Sue Fletcher's little speech when she retired. I think I'm now on my 7th chief exec. I've lost count of the number of chairs that have passed by while I've been here. But I appreciate as a member, from my perspective, having been an officer and having had to work against, or rather with, not against, with policies that, from my perspective, enabled me to do the job as I perceived it as a member, because I was used to having to make difficult decisions, having to make objective decisions on the back of policy rather than emotion, which I do see happen, particularly in planning committee, understandably so, but nevertheless, I think, from my perspective, that gets in the way sometimes of being able to understand and appreciate why policy is the way it is, why we adopted those policies, why we committed ourselves to implementing those policies, and then we ignore them on occasions. And I think those are times, there are times when that's entirely appropriate, don't get me wrong, but I think we really need to examine in detail why it is on occasions that we go against policy so that we can justify it in the most appropriate way. So from my perspective, I've appreciated being a member. It took me a while to stop being an officer. That, I think, is understandable. And it's taken me a while to function as chair as opposed to being a member. It's awfully different when you move from those seats to this seat. And I think my successor will find the same. Nothing changes in that sense. But I've appreciated being a member. I've appreciated working with members when I was on the floor, as it were, not in celebration or any other way. But I've also appreciated the support that members have given me as chair in the different ways in which members have supported me as chair. And I hope that they will feel that I've at least enabled them to function as members and will appreciate the support that I think I've given, I hope I've given, in that fashion. So I think, thank you very much. As Janet said, I'm still around. I'm still here for 6 weeks, but now I think it's time for lunch. So thank you. But what I will say on the back of that is let's not forget that we lost one of our members in the recent elections. Ken Richardson is no longer the Barnsley rep on the authority. A number of us sent our commiserations to him and thanked him for the work that he had done as the Barnsley representative, and he made some appreciative noises on the back of that. So he didn't go unrecognised, and he didn't go without our thanks. So in the same, I hope that members appreciate that, you know, we did say cheerio to Ken, both from myself, and I know Phil had a chat with him when he brought in some of the equipment that he had borrowed from us. So on that note, both for myself and for Ken, thank you very much. I would suggest we try to meet back here at 10 to the hour. But before we go, I was just about to say that. Before we go, can we just move the draft motion so that we can go straight into Part B when we come back? So, Mandy and Janet, all those in favour? Thank you. Anyone against? Any abstentions? Right. Ruth, I'm sorry. You'd like to abstain? Okay. In that case, it's lunchtime. Hopefully back here for about 10 to 2 when we will carry on with Part B and then Members' Forum on the local plan.